Mute that. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. This is Doc Skinner with 1028 Live. It is Tuesday, November 26, 2019. And boy, do I got a show for you tonight. Lots of big things and lots of big news, but I got to hold on and I'll share that with you after the holiday. Boy, do I got some really cool stuff to tell you guys. But tonight I've got even cooler stuff. I've got an amazing guest, and Andrew Basiago, who's going to be on, and we're going to learn all about him if you don't know who he is and his story. It's an amazing story. So we will get to that in just a moment. Oh, shoot. You're probably wondering what this image is behind me. It's kind of a hint on what's coming. So let me change back to the there we go. All right. So first off, we got to say hello to our sponsor, Psionics, the Psionics night vision camera, full color night vision. So you're not looking at like green and black or, black and white. It's full color. And this little bad boy is awesome. You can mount it to a tripod. If you get the Explorer edition, which I'll tell you about in a minute, it comes with a mount for a rifle. It also has SD card up to 32 gigs of memory, 720, and can shoot from 5 frames to 60 frames per second. This thing is literally just a bad boy. It takes photos, it takes video, it takes loops. Wait, I'm on the wrong side. There we go. It also has playback as well as Wi-Fi, so you can hook it up to your phone and do playback on your phone to show your friends. But I love setting this on my tripod and setting it up straight into the sky so I can see the stars, because when you look up, I mean, even up here on the mountain, you see a lot. But with this, it multiplies it by 100 or 1,000. I mean, it's insane. The constellations and the clusters that you don't see with the naked eye. And the beauty of it being a full color night vision and recording capable is that there are multiple colors. And I am not a scientist. I'm not sure. It's a guess. Best educated guess is that gases and light spectrums is what makes them these beautiful colors, and they're big and bright. And if you're using it, and let's say you have night vision and someone turns on the light or someone drives up and they hit you with the headlamps, it blinds you. It won't, folks. This is awesome. This is the Aurora Sport. Okay. Normally you think these go for thousands of dollars, and they normally do. This is going for $399. That's right, $399. Now, if you want to upgrade it to the Aurora, which is here. Let me just pull this up so you can see the Aurora. It's a beautiful color. It's a black with a forest green. Now, this little bad boy behind me is like this, but it comes with digital GPS and digital compass, so it will record where you are and what direction you're pointing at. So it's also good if you need it in court for some reason. Security forces, I mean, people that fish at night, this is really good, because when you're fishing or if you're looking for certain color buoys, you can't see that with normal night vision. But with this, you can tell the different colors in the buoys. And it really helps. Go to Psionics, SIONYX.com. Check out the videos, the actual videos from these cameras. Now, if you really want to upgrade, you can go to, and by the way, the green one behind me goes for $799. And then you have the Explorer, which comes in a Pelican kit or Pelican case kit, which I don't have a picture of it, with the accessories, as well as a mount for a rifle. And it has an IR flashlight with normally infrared flashlights. You see a red beam. Well, those are normally around 870 nanometers, whereas this one that they have is 920 nanometers, which is outside of that. So when you're shining the light, someone with a naked eye can't see it. So you're lighting up a field, but they can't see it unless they look through the psionics. This is just awesome. So anybody that just loves stargazing, UFO hunting, anything like that, this is a must to add to your little arsenal of camera gear and whatnot. Ghost hunting, you need to check this out. Now, because it's holidays and everything, we got this great sale. And it's only good till Thanksgiving. Now, there's going to be something separate. You can't use this code on Black Friday. Okay, you cannot use this code on Black Friday. They got another code for that. So any other day than the Black Friday sale, go ahead and type in Doc 1028, DOC 1028, no spaces, DOC 1028, and you get your discount for your psionics. And it'll get to you depending where you're at. Everybody I know that's got one so far has gotten theirs within 2 weeks. But yeah, check it out. Code's Doc1028. Awesome. I'm so happy that they're my sponsor. I love this thing. I use it every night. I still have not put the video together of all this footage I got with the UFOs, the elk herd that walked past my front door. It's pretty cool. So psionics, check it out. All right, now lots of other cool things coming up. I said movies were coming to the mountain, and I was not kidding. It is coming. 2020 is going to be the new roaring 20s of this century. And man, so much good stuff. I haven't really had time to process it all. It's happened all so fast, but it all comes down to hard work, sacrificing, and GSD, getting it done. So, if you have a dream out there and you're trying to, make it a reality, you can. You just don't quit. That's the key. Never give up, and always find the good and even the bad. I mean, Edison said he didn't fail 1,000 times. He learned 1,000 ways not to invent the light bulb. So, stick with it, okay? Because it does pay off, and it's going to show. What me and my partners, Martina Webster and Jessica Stevens, have done. You guys are in for a treat this year. You're in for a treat. Everything's going up a whole bunch of notches this year. All right. So onward. You've all been waiting. Let me see. Hold on. Let me check, make sure. If you'd like to join us in the chat room here live on YouTube, you can. Real quick, I'm going to do something. I'm going to ask you all to do. Go ahead into the share spot. I want you to copy and paste the link for this. And whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on. Copy and paste it. And go ahead and put it into your, platforms, Facebook, Twitter, what have you. And please share this because this is going to be an awesome show tonight. I'm doing that right now. I'm going to my page, pop that in there. So add it to my story as well. And then that's good to go. Hopefully, is it? No, I didn't do it. Hold on. Delete. I did it way too fast, folks. I didn't let it sit. So we go back, paste it. Wait for there we go. Here we go. All right. So I've done my sharing. I hope you do the same. Get that all done. That's out of the way. And here we are. We got Richie. Rich has joined. Hey, thank you very much. The Brotherhood of Light brought me here. Well, I'm glad they did, Richie. Dave Dennis from Australia. How you doing? Good to always have you with us, Dave. Good to be back. He says, looking forward to the interview. Yes, me too. Isabel is always with us, and we love it when she's here. Thank you for joining. All right, so let's kick it off. Get a swig real quick because that was a lot of chatting. All right, the next gentleman I'm bringing on right now via phone. Let me get his photo up here so we get off the psionics. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you a dear friend of mine who is an amazing man, brilliant man, Andrew D. Basiago. Andrew, welcome to my show.
Great to be with you, Doc. My brother, my friend.
Good. So, I'm glad that you're getting back into the circuit again. People have been asking me about having you on the show, but I know you've been busy. You've been doing a lot of things. A lot of people that are watching are going to be they're going to be introduced to you tonight for the first time. So, I think it'd be best if we could tell the audience a little bit about who Andrew D. Basiago is. Where he's from and what he's about.
Well, I'm a lawyer in Washington State, admitted to the Washington State Bar Association and the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington. I served in 3 classified defense projects, 2 of which we're going to discuss tonight, and which I've been discussing for 15 years with the American public so they know the truth about what our great country has achieved and kept secret. For reasons that I don't believe are any longer tenable. And actually, after serving, and during the time I was serving in those 2 projects, I earned 6 academic degrees, a BA in history from UCLA, a BS in advanced math that was conferred secretly by the Naval Postgraduate School at UCLA, And then I went on to study law at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, where I earned a Juris Doctor and a certificate in environmental and natural resources law with plans of becoming an environmental lawyer. And then I earned a Master of City and Regional Planning with distinction from Cal Poly SLO and a Master of Philosophy from the University of Cambridge. I was the 280th American to take a degree from Magdalen College, Cambridge, one of its 22 colleges, since the founding of Magdalen College, Cambridge in the year 1428. The first graduate being Henry Dunster, the first president of Harvard College, today Harvard University. So I worked hard to not only serve the country, but then pursue a higher education. And when that phase in my life was completed, I then passed the bar and then the federal bar in Washington State, where I've been practicing for almost 25 years, 23 years to be exact. But about 15 years ago, I realized that the most important thing I could do to help our country and our planet was bring forward the truth about what the first defense project that I worked in, Project Pegasus, that was under DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. I served in that project from 1968 to 1972, when I was age 6 to age 10, almost 11. Being September born, and I've been speaking out since October of 2004. I've now done about 50 conferences, close to 500 TV and radio shows about it, and lectured all over the hemisphere, from Kelowna, British Columbia in the north to Cordoba, Argentina in the south, and from Orlando, Florida in the east to Kona, Hawaii in the west, in an attempt to get the truth out about the fact that time travel was achieved by the United States government by 1970. Pegasus was the U.S. time-space program at the time of the emergence of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community. Since about 2010, I've been speaking out about the second project I was in. That took place between, or at least my experiences in that project. I don't know how long it lasted after I left the project. But I was in the CIA's Mars Jump Room program, also just informally spoken of as Project Mars, from 1980 to 1984 when I was an undergraduate at UCLA. Project Mars was focused around one technology. It was an aeronautical repositioning chamber, known as an ARC, or space elevator, also known as a jump room. It was under an American who was supposedly dead at the time. I think we all heard about Howard Hughes dying in 1976. He didn't. He lived until 2001.
I've heard that rumor.
And he was the director of the CIA's Mars Jump Room program. And I met Hughes in that capacity. So I've been speaking out about that since 2010. And the net result is I've been able, as one individual, to essentially end the time travel cover-ups and the Mars cover-ups by our government. There's no way that they can put the genie back in the bottle at this point. Now, my reasons for doing so have been many and varied, and hopefully we can talk about some of those tonight. But I was doing what was right for my country and my world by coming forward with this information, and I'll explain why that's so. But that's essentially what's been unique about my life, besides practicing law and working as a journalist. When I was a young man, I was a protege of Norman Cousins of the Saturday Review. I wrote for the Cousteau Society under Jean-Michel Cousteau, the son of Captain Cousteau. Mm-hmm. So I've done a lot in my life. I wanted to live a life that would emulate my heroes. My heroes have been people like Benjamin Franklin and Buckminster Fuller and Captain Cousteau, Jacques Cousteau, in the sense that I wanted to live a prolific life that would accomplish much on behalf of humanity and our country. And I have. And so, I'm going to continue to write, continue to talk about these programs, because it's essential that the public understand that I'm not making this up. I've been telling the truth from the beginning of my public career 15 years ago as a public speaker and a media personality. I'm not some wackadoodle making stuff up. Okay? Now, the truth movement, which I've been a major figure in, and which I was the first major figure in to run for president when I ran for president in 2016, is now kind of divided between individuals who have served the country in secret programs who are now coming forward, and many of us came forward originally at the risk of our lives, and another group of individuals who are making up basically science fiction fantasy stories of what they did. So I'm in the first category. I'm talking about actual programs.
Not people that jumped on the train.
You talk about them tonight.
Yeah, just not being somebody that jumped on the bandwagon.
No, in fact, I don't want to brag, but I think I kickstarted the secret space program literature when I began talking about Project Pegasus in 2004, and then the Mars Jump Room program, not in 2010, in 2009. I did my first conference around it. And then what happened is I brought forward 4 other individuals I served with, but then other individuals began emulating us and making up stories. So the whole picture now is kind of confused. I have really no choice at this point, Doc, but to continue to tell the truth and tell it as often and as clearly as I can, because it's important that the truth movement achieve its objectives of bringing all of these secret programs forward, because they should never have been kept secret.
Right. Wow.
And I might add that the Cold War is over. I mean, the Cold War ended in 1989. That was what, 30 years ago? Almost 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Or no, 30 years ago, per se. So we're no longer living in the Cold War. And so there's no justification for keeping these types of programs secret.
Now, there seems to be a lot of films and TV series that have come out the past couple of years that incorporate secret space programs in one way or another. There's actually a show on CBS or ABC called, oh crap, now I just went blank on it. I'm seeing it in my head, but I can't say it. It's basically emulating as the main character is Elon Musk, and they have almost basically the same ship that he's building in a bunker, and he wants to go to Mars and everything. And there's other forces and powers to be. It seems like because of you coming out years ago and now others coming out, it is now already bleeded into the entertainment area, where more and more people are ready for it. They're, like you said, it's the Cold War is over. They don't need to keep these secrets from us anymore, unless it's on purpose because they don't think we're worthy of it, or we're just cattle, like some of the top elites think. What do you think?
Well, there have been major disinformational ploys directed at both the government's achievement of time travel and its achievement of Mars visitation. I think the 2 major ones have been the Philadelphia experiment cover story versus the real story, which we can share tonight if you'd like.
Oh, yes, please.
And then also the use of Elon Musk and even the last 2 presidents of the United States, Barack Obama and Donald Trump, to suggest that we have not yet been to Mars. The truth, and I know this to a legal and an historical certainty, and I'm a man of truth. I've embodied truth my entire life. And I make no bones about that fact. American astronauts first visited Mars in the year 1964 when I was 3 years old. And I first went there via the aeronautical repositioning chambers, not via rocket, in July of 1981 when I was 19 years old, almost 20. As did many of the other people I worked with. We were 19 years old, 17, 14 years old. Okay, they wanted to, just as they wanted to acclimatize children to time travel when I was in Project Pegasus from 1968 to 72, they wanted to acclimate young adults and really just teenagers to going to Mars via this revolutionary device when I was in it between 1980 and 84. Okay, so the two of the major disinformational ploys have been the Philadelphia experiment story that's been told over and over again in the feature film by that name, TV shows, books, and so forth. And then all of the individuals who've been used to suggest that we still have to go to Mars. Now, I don't really want to criticize Elon Musk because I think he's a brilliant industrialist, and he's certainly somebody in my generation that I admire. But he has not contacted me. And like I said, I've done 500 interviews, and I've lectured all over the hemisphere about the truth about Mars. So he doesn't want to seem willing to embrace the truth that he would not be sending human beings from Earth to Mars for the first time. Not only did they visit in antiquity, but when I was there in the 1980s, William Whitecrow, who was one of my fellow Mars astronauts who sadly passed away last year, told me one time that there were as many as 1,500 other Americans in different locations around planet Mars when we were up there. Usually we were in the company of just a few of our colleagues. Mars is about 40% the size of Earth, but it was still big enough for us to be deployed all over the surface. So we don't have to, but there's no need to go to Mars for the first time. That's the key thing that people need to understand. We've been there. Mm-hmm. We first got there, what is that, 55 years ago?
Yeah, 64, yeah.
55 years ago this year. So that's one reason I've been speaking out. Imagine that. There's been over a half century plus cover-up of what our space program achieved of going to Mars, and yet when NASA was founded as NARA in the year 1958, the principal function, the principal mandate that was given by the U.S. Congress was the expansion of human knowledge of space and the near-Earth environment. That was what was supposed to achieve. And yet we've been covering up the fact that, for 55 years we've been sending Americans, British, and Russian astronauts, and probably at this point, astronauts from other countries. I'm not aware because I'm no longer in the program. But I met not just fellow Americans, but Britons and Russians on the surface of planet Mars. And that was already 35 years ago when I went up. So, I mean, I really feel that we have to regain our purpose as a country, understand what we were trying to achieve. And I find it completely unacceptable that we have concealed the fact that we sent American and astronauts from other countries to planet Mars, the planet that every 2 years comes closest to Earth, and we did so, 55 years ago. We cannot continue to keep this secret. It's wrong.
Yeah.
The people have a right to know, and I think not only the American people have a right to know that our astronauts have been there, but I think the people around the Earth, all 7-8 billion of us, have as part of the common heritage of humankind the right to know the natural history of Earth and what we've done. And one of those things has involved going to the Red Planet.
Yeah. Wow. National Geographic or History Channel did a series called Mars, and
they took from the group I founded in 2008, the Mars Anomaly Research Society.
Okay.
Right there in capital letters.
Wow. I didn't realize that. But yeah, the storyline and everything, it made me think of you because it was an amazing series or season, at least. I don't know if there's a second season, but I don't know why they want to continue saying that we're not there because so much proof has come. Even Google Mars has slipped up and shown images that weren't erased that show a solar farm with buildings with air conditioning ducts and a pickup truck. I mean, who knows if it's real or not? But I have heard you say that the air is breathable to an extent, like at high altitude. Is that correct, or
Yeah,
am I mistaken?
it's like Mars' atmosphere is definitely thinner than ours. It was estimated in our training program, and we had to get used to this idea. In fact, we were taken to one of the mountains in California to test how much altitude we could stand before we went up. But I think it was Mount Baker, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a long time. But the atmosphere on Mars is about what the atmosphere is at 12 to 14,000 feet on Earth. That would be sort of like the first station when you climb up Mount Everest.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I was able to carry my colleague Bernard Mendez a mile to safety when I was in the program, despite that. So we kind of adjusted to it. But one time I had a hyperventilation incident just because I realized how thin the air was that we were breathing. Initially, when we went up, we had respiration devices, but then everybody was sort of just flaunting the fact that they weren't using theirs.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, some of my colleagues were smoking on the surface of Mars despite that thin atmosphere. But it was difficult, and I would often develop hypoxia, which is low oxygen, that would just cause screaming pains in my legs when I was up there. And in fact, today I have numbness in the lower half of my legs and in my feet and ankles that never really has gone away. But I would get screaming pains from hypoxia because of the thin atmosphere there.
Wow. Well, what is your opinion? And I want to get back to what you're saying, but just while we're here on Mars, what is your opinion about the population that's there now inhabiting it? Because even raw NASA satellite images that you can go to the NASA's website if you know which frame to look at or which roll of film, it looks like trees in some areas. It looks like herds of something running across the plane. Do you believe, in your opinion, that there's a large population of people living there, and that's why they're keeping it secret? Because was it Alternative 3, where all the rich people go to another planet when we kill off our planet?
Well, that's somewhat of a difficult question. So let me kind of address different aspects that it implies. First of all, I wrote the first paper or written work to show images of humanoids and animals on another planet. That was my paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, in December of 2008, 12/12/08. And in that paper, I revealed the humanoids and animals, the statues, and artifacts on Mars. And I show that Mars was inhabited both in antiquity and is inhabited today. So addressing the natural life forms on Mars, there are 5 different primates. There are Homo Martis terris, who are the descendants of Earthlings who went there in antiquity. And they look pretty much like us, although their musculature and body they're larger than us, and their bodies are a little bit shaped differently.
Is that because of the gravity there? Because one of the things I did want to mention,
also because they were the descendants of the Martians who dug out of the debris caused by the solar system catastrophe of 9500 BC,
which was the planet Mardar or something that blew up and became the asteroid field that we have now, or the asteroid belt.
Possibly. That's one explanation.
And supposedly parts of that are what came and seeded the Earth or hit the moon as well and made it stop. There's a lot of that's been mentioned a lot recently, so it's funny you bring that up as well.
Right. So that's the first type. They look essentially like us. The men tend to be bald. I never met any of the women of their species, but they are basically human beings from Earth that we could probably reproduce with, because they haven't been separated from Earth for that long. Probably anywhere from about 10 to 100,000 years.
Well, here's a scientific question though. In that show Mars, there was the first child that was born in the colony. The mother wanted to come back to Earth, and they're like, you can't, because the child was born at this gravity. Now,
right, there is different gravity there. In fact, the resonance, the different resonance of the planet as distinguished from the Schumann resonance on Earth, was definitely something we had to adjust to. It was a mind blower when we first went up, each of us. So then the second type, Homo Martis Martis, are the indigenous Martians that were there when Earthlings went there in antiquity, like during the High Egyptian civilization that produced the first type. Okay, so they're smaller than us, spindlier bodies. The males, the males and females, which I did see and I did meet, in fact, not only have pointed ears unlike ours, but many of the men, certainly the adult males, have antennae out of their temples,
Really?
which are sensing organs of different types. And they have a very kind of shy, recondite personality. Some of them in adulthood, particularly the males, are really quite homely. They kind of look like the character that the German actor Max Schrank played, Count Orlok, in the classic 1922, I believe, German horror film Nosferatu.
Oh,
have you seen that?
Oh yeah, that was Nosferatu. Yeah. Now he was. So you're saying they look like Nosferatu with the pointed ears and the bald head?
They basically looked like that Max Schrank character in Nosferatu, Count Orlok, but they weren't as big as him. He was like 6'6". They were all like 5 feet tall,
Okay.
and the women were even smaller. Now the women and the children, the women were very attractive, and the children were very cute, just like cute Chinese and Tibetan children.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them wore, all of the Homo Martis Martis, the Mars men from Mars, as it were, wear caftans, those long pieces of clothing in black, white, and blue colors primarily. But they were very nice to me, even though we were told that occasionally they were killing one of our Mars astronauts and barbecuing them for dinner.
Wow.
That they were, a danger to us. So I was always kind of wary of them.
When you were there, was it a heavy military presence or more civilian? Was it a heavy, size population or a small colony? Was it spread out?
It was a mix of civilians and military. So, for example, myself and William B. Stillings, who I was trained with and was often on the surface with, one of the youngest Mars astronauts at the time and one of the first people to come forward. I really salute Brett for his courage during his life in terms of both going there and then telling the truth about what happened. But we were civilians, and then William Whitecrow was Army. Bernard Mendez was sort of in between. He was sort of a special investigator for the Defense Department. And then, of course, Ken Johnston Sr., who was driving this sort of, we called it the sky taxi or hopper, which was sort of a lenticular craft combined with a helicopter, and he would rescue us if we were in trouble, like if we were at danger of being eaten by one of the predators on Mars. Ken was a Marine veteran, but he had a background with Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, working for NASA with all the NASA astronauts, and then he joined the Mars program as an astronaut. So it was sort of a mix of both civilians and military, but then people sort of in between, people with military backgrounds who were working for the Defense Department.
I just want to say something really quick that I'm noticing between your story of your past and others that I've heard, and I'm not going to mention anybody, they're talking about you tonight, but others where you were the first and you have names, and then eventually those people with those names came out to corroborate your story. And others I've heard, it's just them on their own. There's no names or anything that I've noticed. I feel for me, that is why I know you're not lying. I'm very impressed with that, and the fact that these gentlemen have decided, to come out and confirm their story. So,
right, in the law we talk about mere allegation versus corroboration. So
correct.
like if I say I have been to Moscow, that's a mere allegation. But if I say I have been to Moscow, and here is my good friend from Moscow, and here is her Russian passport, and here she is to testify that she introduced me to her mother in Moscow. Okay, that's corroboration. Now, what the super soldiers, I don't know if we want to name names tonight, but with the super soldiers who followed me and the other actual experiencers, what they have in common, first of all, is exaggeration. Most of the hoaxers ultimately exaggerate their claims. So, for example, Aaron McCullum claimed he was part dolphin. Corey Good has claimed that he met his handler Gonzalez in the Kuiper Belt, when you don't have to go to the Kuiper Belt to meet an intel handler. The last one I met was at Abe's Deli in Northridge when it was still existed. And then, Randy Kramer saying he's been consulting a general all this time since he was on Mars, and the general's been talking to him inside his own head. So ultimately the hoaxers reveal that they are hoaxing because they exaggerate. And the other thing is that those who are making up their stories have no corroboration. They will say, I did not only went to Mars, but I was, or elsewhere in space, and I did 20 years or 40 years or 60 years there, whatever. But they can't name a single person that they knew when they were doing so. Well, wait a minute. Doc, I went to kindergarten in Morris Plains, New Jersey from 1966 to 67. I entered at age 4 and turned 5 in September of 66. And I could sit here if we had the time and name like 20 people I went to kindergarten with.
Correct.
In fact, let me just one name. It was a little girl who, God bless her memory, she passed away from cancer, from leukemia, childhood leukemia, in the fall of my kindergarten year. And here's her name. It was Sally Holmquist. Now, how is it that as an attorney of almost 25 years of experience, where I've been busy all the time, as a public speaker and media personality who's now done 500 radio and TV interviews and conferences around the world, that I remember who I went to kindergarten with, but some of these hoaxers, I call them exo-hoaxers, by the way, that's a term I've invented to describe making false claims about serving in the secret space program. They can't name a single person they served with. I just find that obvious evidence of stories being made up rather than actually lived. And I don't think that the purposes of the truth movement will work when we sort of abide by this, this common wisdom that you shouldn't criticize anybody else in the field. America has always taken on hoaxers.
Yeah. They say it's easier to spread a...
We believed when we were founded that we were the fulfillment of the Enlightenment. And, much of what I learned in history at UCLA was actually trying to establish what happened by discerning made-up stories and folklore from what really happened, And we have to do the same thing in the truth movement and regarding the secret space program, or we're not going to get the truth out about what our country has done.
Yeah. Do you think that it will be revealed here soon? The fact that Trump started the Space Force being a way to explain away certain sightings, possibly the tube ships that everybody sees, which I call the flying subs.
Well, I've heard some stories, that I think that despite Democratic criticism of President Trump, I think he is somewhat of an independent bent. In fact, I'm going to be writing him. I've already drafted the letter to him, asking him to declassify the Mars program, finally pay the salary, the benefits, the military decorations that we earned. I, for example, was told that I had earned the Space Medal of Honor when I saved Bernard Mendez's life, as I just described, and then also, reveal to the people what we've done there, and why it's important. So that letter will go out sometime in 2020.
Okay.
I've also written a letter to Barack Obama because he was not only the 44th president, but many years earlier, he was one of our fellow astronauts. That's not a made-up story. Why would we have made up a story about Barack Obama being one of our fellow astronauts when he was a sitting president, when people would say, oh, yeah, and Obama was one of you. Right. What a crazy story. The problem we were confronted by was he was one of our fellow astronauts. He was then using the name Barry Soetoro. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't from Africa, nor was he from America. He told me not only that he was from Indonesia, but that his birth father was Muhammad Sumawati Hijojo, the founder of the Subud Muslim sect in Indonesia. So I don't know why. Maybe it's the connection of the CIA that former President Obama has sought to conceal. But he has not told the truth about the fact that not only did we serve, but he served in that program. Now, when we came out and revealed in 2011 or so, and that was myself and William Stillings and Bernard Mendez, that President Obama was one of our fellow Mars astronauts that we were trained with and we were frequently on the surface with. He had Tommy Vitor, the PR director of the National Security Council of that time. He later left the Obama administration. But he had Tommy Vitor plant an article in Wired.com magazine in which he laughed at the president laughed at our allegation and said that the only time he had any contact with Mars was when he watched the show Marvin of the Martians with his two daughters, Sasha and Malia, on Saturday morning cartoons. Now think about that. That was the sitting president of the United States of America, the 44th president, the first African-American president, or the first black president. Mm-hmm. He's not African-American. He was a black Indonesian gentleman. And I liked Barry. He was a nice guy. He was a smart guy, too. I once said regarding my friendship with Barry Soetoro, who later became Barack Obama and ran for president, that among the roughly 2,000 people I met or went to school with during my 5 years at UCLA, Barack Obama was one of the few individuals, or at least one of the first individuals, that I would trust with the responsibility and the difficult decision-making of the presidency. So I really like Barry, as I call him, not Barack, because that's how I met him. He was a good guy. He was a smart guy. He had a good sense of humor. I'm straight, but he was not, but that's a matter of diversity of people's sexual orientation. I've never made a big deal out of that. I think there's a diversity of people's sexual orientation that we should respect. But anyway, he was in the program. We didn't make it up. And if you think about it, the logic of it, why would we have said that the sitting president of the United States was in the program unless he was? If by saying it, we hurt our chance of being believed. Okay? But he lied. And he was lying about fellow astronauts who went to another planet. Mars is millions of miles from Earth. And we were all risking our lives by going there. I watched two of my colleagues being literally bitten to death by predators right in front of me. One was a guy about 45 years old named Bob, and the other was a 16-year-old kid from Southern California named David. And I watched them die on the surface. And Barry wasn't with us Barack Obama wasn't with us during those jumps. But he knew that we were facing dangerous predators. There were two dangerous predators in particular, at about 5 to 6 dangerous predators among approximately 30 major land animals on the surface of Mars that we were trained to be able to identify and know if they were a risk to us. So imagine that, an American president not only lying about American astronauts going to for among the first time to another planet, but also his own participation in doing so. That's how secrecy has destroyed the integrity of our common culture. That's why I've been speaking out. But it's true. Barack Obama was one of the Mars astronauts in the 1980s.
All right. Now, there's other people. Although there was another person, but we're not going to talk about him. But that they deny, and it could be because it's still top secret or whatnot. But do you think there's a chance that he is blatantly denying it, or there's a chance that, like a Manchurian candidate, it's been erased? and he just has no recollection of it whatsoever. Not saying he wasn't there. Do you think that's a possibility? I mean, he did end up becoming
a very fascinating and important question. In fact, Bernard Mendez and I, who were consulting William Spillings at the time, back in 2011-2012 timeframe, we went to Obama. And Bernard Mendez, who, as I described, he had a connection to the Defense Department that I didn't have. I mean, I had served in 2 projects, but I wasn't, a Defense Department investigator. And Bernard Mendez went to Obama through an intermediary. And he said he remembered the program. He remembered me vividly because we had not only been trained together and on the surface together sometimes, but we had roomed together when we were being trained at College of the Siskiyous in Weed, California, in summer of 1980.
Was that a CIA cover school?
It was a small California community college where we could have conversations about Mars, and anybody who came by the door would have thought we were just taking an astronomy course about the red planet. They didn't realize we were going to go there. Yeah. But it was a small enough school also just to be avoided altogether.
Okay.
But he said that Obama said through the intermediary to Bernard Mendez, and that's how I got the information, that his memories of the program were, quote, vague and dreamlike. And again, I can commend Barry for being a pretty nice guy, because that was something we all experienced. Because when we would come back from Mars in the aeronautical repositioning chamber, or jump room, or space elevator as it was called variously, Major Ed Dames, who was working at 999 North Sepulveda, where the West Coast jump room was based, right south of the Los Angeles International Airport there, right south of Imperial Avenue, east and west. You've got 999 North Sepulveda.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Dames would he'd put this device in our heads and subject us to memory deletion, essentially what we'd just done, at least memory suppression for many years, using this device, which was the American reverse-engineered version of a Soviet device called the LIDA machine, capital L-I-D-A, capital L, capital I, capital D, capital A, the Soviet LIDA. It must be an acronym in Russian. And what that did was create all these bizarre sound effects that suppressed what you had just done. So when Spillings and Mendez and I teamed up in Brett approached me in spring of 2010, and then Bernie in summer of 2011. We were helping each other work through the memory suppression that we've been subjected to. So when President Obama said to us, as the sitting U.S. president, I remember you, I remember Andy vividly, because we roomed together and so forth. We were the same age. In fact, Obama is just 45 days older than me. And I remember the program, but it was vague and dreamlike. That was the truth, because we were all dealing with vague and dreamlike memories when we first started recovering them for 30 years. I started remembering my memories after I had written The Discovery of Life on Mars and analyzed NASA's pictures from Mars. I remembered that, for example, when we were in training in summer of 80, 28 years before I wrote and published that paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, that Ed Dames had revealed to the whole class, using the quantum access capability of the CIA and the military, that far in the future I would be the individual writing the paper about life on Mars.
And that you would be the whistleblower of the program.
And I would be the whistleblower of the program. So they knew. In fact, Brett Stillings and I were threatened when we entered the program in early August of 1980, or actually mid-August of 1980. And we were threatened never to talk about the program. So when you ask, why has Barack Obama not come forward? Why has Regina Dugan, who he appointed the first female and the 19th director of DARPA on July 20th of 2009, why did William Cameron McCool never come forward before sadly dying on Space Shuttle Columbia on February 1st of 2003? Why did other distinguished Americans who went to Mars not come forward? Several that I met on Mars were Ross Perot, Ross Perot, the Texas oil man and company founder, who ran for president in 1992 for the Reform Party. I met Ross Perot on the surface, had discussions with him there. He never paid any attention to the predators around us. That's what I remembered about Ross. He was quite courageous. I met Admiral Stansfield Turner, who had been the CIA director recently for President Jimmy Carter at that point. And then, of course, we were serving Reagan by going up there. And I also met Mary Jean Eisenhower, the aunt of my dear friend Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, the public speaker.
Yep.
And the person who's come forward about President Eisenhower's contact with extraterrestrials, which is a major service that Laura's provided to the Truth Movement, and for that matter, the Secret Space Program literature. But I did one jump with her aunt, Mary Jean Eisenhower, who then went on to become the president of the People-to-People Ambassadors Program, which is a second-level diplomacy program founded by her distinguished grandfather, President Dwight David Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States. So there were distinguished Americans going to Mars, I think with a focus on those who would seek the presidency or be fingered to maybe consider becoming presidency. That would include myself, Obama, Dugan, Perot, and Mary Jean Eisenhower. It's certainly conspicuous that Ross, Barry, and I have run for president, that Mary Jean would become the president of the People-to-People Ambassadors Program, founded by her grandfather, the president, and that Regina Elvira Dugan would be not only a brilliant graduate of Caltech, but would be the first woman to be appointed the director of DARPA, the very U.S. agency that developed time travel that I served in Project Pegasus as a child.
And then she went on to, dominate Google for a while, I think, didn't she?
Yeah, I mean, Regina is one of the most distinguished women.
Show a picture of that. There she is right there, folks.
Generation. She was a couple years younger. I think she was born on, if I'm not mistaken, she was born on March 17th of 63. She's a brilliant individual. I considered her, asking her to be my vice presidential running mate in 2016, but then I thought otherwise when she seemed to come out for microchipping human beings, which I oppose. Yeah,
she. I saw the TED Talk where she came out and showed the little digital tattoos, and it made reference how kids are going to get it just to piss their parents off, But
in my 100 proposals, I actually have at this point I forget what I called it, but I have one paragraph, one proposal of my 100 proposals when I ran for president about not basically diminishing human dignity by tattooing and microchipping people like that. The Nazis tattooed numbers on Jewish victims of the Holocaust.
Yeah, which were run through the very first IBM computer. It was supposed to, calculate their worth.
Right, and Thomas Watson of IBM created that system and provided it to the Nazis.
That's right.
Just as Henry Ford of Ford Motor was a vicious anti-Semite who wrote a ridiculously prejudicial book called The International Jew. As you may know, Doc, I'm part Catholic and part Jewish. I did grow up as a Roman Catholic, in fact, a confirmed Catholic, but I'm Jewish on both of my grandmother's side, both Ashkenazi and Sephardic. In fact, I'm a descendant of the Albo family of Spain, which had distinguished members like Rabbi Joseph Albo, who defended Judaism at the disputation of Tortosa in 1314, but also Francisco Albo, who was a Roman Catholic from Spain, who was the navigator on Magellan's circumnavigation of the globe, who wrote the book about that exploration program. And here I find myself having just completed a 300-chapter book about Project Pegasus and my experiences time traveling for the U.S. government, and a 150-chapter book telling about my Mars visitation experiences. So I'm trying to promote brotherhood and love between people of all colors, all faiths, all religions, because I believe that there is one race, the human race.
Right.
The average human being, Doc, possesses 87% the same genes everything that makes us distinctive as individuals,
Mm-hmm.
our skin color, the way our noses are shaped, our hair color and texture, that's only, and everything, our sex, everything, that's only 13% of our genes. We are truly one race.
Right.
And just as when I ran for president, I wanted to, I didn't have a chance to, but I wanted to communicate to Black America, we're always talking down on Black America. We're always saying, things like, there are more Black men in prison than college. But what about the fact that Black people in this country overcame 200 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, and 100 more years of invidious discrimination, but have distinguished themselves in every field in America, from acting to zoology.
Right.
They are literally the most successful minority group in the history of civilization. And I say that as not just somebody of Catholic and Jewish ancestry, but somebody who's of Polish, Austro-Hungarian, Spanish, French, Irish, North African, and African ancestry. I really have to laud the Black people of this country. Two of my heroes at UCLA were Kenny Burrell, the guitarist, who I studied the music of Duke Ellington with, in a class that taught me much more about life than Duke Ellington, and Rayford Johnson. I nominated Rayford, who had been the student body president of UCLA after he was the Olympic decathlon champion in 1960. I nominated Rayford, who later went on to serve one of my heroes, Robert F. Kennedy, in 1968, Senator Robert Kennedy. I nominated Rayford for Bruin of the Half Century at UCLA because he's done incredible things with his life. He not only served RFK, but he's worked on the Special Olympics with some of RFK's surviving sisters and his former wife, his widow, Ethel Kennedy. So, two of the formative experiences I had as a young man when I was going to Mars was being educated by Black men like Kenny Burrell and Rayford Johnson. But I also worked with a Jewish mentor, Norman Cousins, a remarkable man. I've had the privilege of also being inspired by incredible clerics in my own religion, Roman Catholicism. So I really want to not only promote justice in America, but brotherhood and love. I really think we have to start talking about it again. When people started attacking the hoaxers in the secret space program, there were threats that were made. So, for example, when Corey Goode was challenged by his own producer, Jay Widener, on Yvonne DiCarlo's show, Groovy Bean, on radio, in a 5-part series, describing how Corey was lying, which is a damaging thing to be said by your producer.
Wow.
As you know.
I was not aware that it was his producer that said that.
Yvonne was crying. The host of that radio show was crying on her own show because her life had been threatened by Corey's supporters and fans. Now, that's not America. We don't threaten people's lives for disagreeing with us.
Yeah.
We fought a civil war that we could have resolved by freeing the slaves and protecting the interests of the South, basically, and the North, for that matter. We could have achieved a compromise. We made several attempts at it in 1850 and right before the war started. And we lost 600,000 Americans in the Civil War?
Yeah.
And that the greatest industry in North and South, in cities and towns after the Civil War, was artificial limbs. That was the number one industry in America in the generation that had fought the war.
Yeah.
One of whom was my ancestor, August Borneman, who was a cavalry commander for the Missouri Cavalry for the Union, which I'm very proud of. He was a captain in the Missouri Cavalry for the Union. He was my great-great-great-grandfather on my mother's side, one of them. So I really feel compelled now not just to run for president based on truth, but calling for love and justice in America. Yeah. And maybe we can do a later show about 4 cases that I'd like to discuss that really show the degree to which we have lost our vision about justice in America. Well, we need to restore justice in America.
Yes, and we will get to that. We got plenty of time. Now, for the new people, they're hearing you talk about jump rooms. They're hearing you talk about all these celebs going to Mars, or politicians, I mean. Can we give for the next 30 minutes, can we talk about how the jump room came to be and how...
Let me quickly describe 3 of the 8 modalities of time travel that I experienced. I'll be real quick.
Oh, you don't have to. No, I'm saying you don't have to be quick. We have all the time in the world. We will take a break at the half hour, so people, okay, like a 2-3 minute break. So you can take a break. I can take a break real quick. And then we'll come back and we'll continue. So yes, don't worry about time.
Okay, great, Doc. The first major device was Tesla teleportation. In Tesla teleportation, you stand in front of 2 parentheses-shaped objects, and they're radiating something that Tesla called radiant energy back and forth between the 2 armatures of the device. That's what they were called. When you did, and you had to do so traveling at a meter per second, or you would be dismembered, like you'd lose an arm or a leg, or get cut in half. So we had to literally leap through this field of radiant energy. When we did, what's called a vortal tunnel would open up in the fabric of time-space. What is not known by the public is that beneath this layer, this dimension, is something known as the quantum plenum. There's a layer underneath it. And so when you jump through this device, we tunneled through that quantum plenum. Now, when I would jump through that device, which was at the old Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, where we had built many of our jet fighters during World War II. It was in building 68 of that facility. I would enter this tunnel, and if you looked to the front of the tunnel, you really couldn't tell whether you were flying forward or the tunnel was being moved past your head.
Interesting.
If you looked to the side at the tunnel, there was bluish-white light, and there were holograms of intervening dimensions that you could sometimes see in the tunnel. Several seconds later, we would pop out in the state capitol grounds of New Mexico, in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They were using the area on the side of the Baton Memorial Building, which was the pre-1966 state capitol building before they built the Roundhouse in Santa Fe, which I love, by the way. It's neat. It's one of the most neatest state capitol buildings in the country. And we would pop out and just pop into view. So sometimes when we would teleport to Santa Fe like this, somebody would see us just suddenly appear in front of them. One time, an old man who was taking his morning walk, because of course it was 2 hours earlier when I jumped through the device at 9:50 a.m. at Curtiss-Wright, New Jersey. It was 7:15 a.m. in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this elderly man in a red cravat and a blue shirt and gray pants, he could have been Andre Segovia for all I know. He certainly looked like him. Pointed to me, to this young secretary walking to her morning job, probably, the boy. And she said, "What, sir, what?" And he was saying, the boy, because I had just popped into view right in front of him. Okay, so that's Tesla teleportation.
Now, there's actual videos on YouTube that have gone viral that show like someone riding a bicycle out of nowhere, or a car coming out of nowhere. That seems to be a lot of these videos are appearing. So I'm sorry. Continue.
Governor Jesse Ventura, right to where we were literally teleporting to, and he and Sean Stone and his son Tyrell Ventura, who are his co-hosts, they kind of asked me, why weren't you teleporting directly to the Los Alamos National Labs in Los Alamos? And the reason is it was infiltrated by Soviet intelligence. That was the Klaus Fuchs spy network, in at Lanel, the Los Alamos National Labs. So we couldn't. This is how far out what we were doing was in terms of Tesla teleportation. We couldn't teleport directly to the grounds or inside the building of the Los Alamos National Laboratories in Los Alamos, literally the agency that was responsible for the program, because there were Soviet spies in the building who might find out that we had mastered teleportation. That's why my father and the other people serving on the program picked the Santa Fe State Capitol grounds as the place that we were appearing, not only as kids, but the adults as well.
Okay.
Because if somebody suddenly, I mean, if you ever visit that beautiful state capitol complex, if somebody suddenly popped into view and then walked around a corner, you would think, oh, I was just looking away, and they just walked around the corner of a building.
Right.
So that's why I selected the Santa Fe State Capitol grounds.
Real quick, before we get too far ahead, I have to keep thinking of new viewers that are hearing the story for the first time. You made mention of your father, and you made mention of kids. Now, can you explain who your father was and how he was attached to this program, and then how you were brought into the picture, and amongst other children as well?
Late beloved father was a great man and a great American and a wonderful father. Was Raymond Francis Basiago. He was born in 1923 on the kitchen table in Summit Hill, Pennsylvania, a small coal mining town in eastern Pennsylvania with primarily Polish and Irish immigrant coal miners, which my father was as a young man. In fact, at age 4, he was mining coal to help his family survive during the Depression.
Wow.
And he fought in World War II as a combat medic and ambulance driver for the U.S. Army, for the 13th Airborne Division of the U.S. Army in France and Germany. And after the war, he, on the GI Bill, which is something I should have gotten for serving, but my dad was fortunate to get the GI Bill of Rights, and he earned a BS in electrical engineering at Lehigh University, which has one of the world's leading engineering programs, probably the best electrical engineering program. And my dad mastered electrical, instrumentation, and chemical engineering, but at Lehigh he had studied physics and mathematics. He was a brilliant mathematician. So he was working at Okanite Company in Paramus, New Jersey in 1952, when you may recall that famous UFO overflight of Washington, D.C.
Yes, it was in all the yes.
9 UFOs from outer space clocked at 7,000 miles per hour as detected by the radar station at Langley Air Force Base and reported on the front pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post. That was July of 1952. In October, several months later, a bird colonel from the Army, I believe, not the Air Force, came to my father's table or desk at Okanite and ordered him to report to Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical the next Monday in a secret program to work on the ramjet engine, or the ramjet itself.
Yeah.
To chase the UFOs out of our atmosphere. My father was the designer of the metal alloy by which the ramjet was built at Curtiss-Wright. He also had 4 American patents.
Wow.
Which are too complex to go into. I know the history of some of them, but he was an electrical engineer, an inventor, and as a result of working on the ramjet, he worked on a number of other high-performance jet aircrafts for our government, including the B-52, which you may recall was going to be the flying Chernobyl, the jet bomber with a nuclear power source.
Yeah.
So sometime during the 50s, he was put in touch with the Manhattan Project physicists. I don't know exactly when it was, but he first went to New Mexico in 53, 54 to flight test the ramjet engine. It may have been at that time or later. But in the 50s and 60s, he basically was consulting with the Manhattan Project physicists who had built the atomic bomb, known as the Los Alamos physicists or Project Manhattan physicists, like Dr. Harold M. Agnew, Edward Teller, Emilio Segre, Sterling Colgate, and they were working on time travel. And so my dad was learning the theory and practice of the leading technology they had, the first one I described to you, which is Tesla teleportation. I'd like to describe a few others, but so my dad became, by 1966, the chief technical consultant between the Ralph M. Parsons Company, the leading process engineering company in the world, and the CIA and other U.S. agencies, for that matter, on the theory and practice of Tesla teleportation. So when Project Pegasus was launched in the late 60s, probably by 1968, because that's the first time I went, maybe a year or two earlier. My dad knew the technology. He understood it. He could do complex mathematical calculations like he had done during his 8 years at the Thomas A. Edison Research Labs in West Orange, New Jersey, from 1956 to 64, many of which led to the computer revolution. But he was able to do incredibly sophisticated math. He was a genius in math. Which, again, I tell that story because I want millennials to know, man, it doesn't matter your race, your religion, your gender, where you came from, how rich or poor you were as a kid. In America, you can do anything you put your mind to. My father did.
Yeah.
Look at his life story. I mean, he not only raised 5 extremely wonderful kids. I mean, I love my siblings. They're great people. All of them in healthcare, by the way. Only myself in the law. But I want the millennials to know that, my dad went from being born on the kitchen table in an impoverished coal mining town in the Depression, where he was having apple butter jelly and toast 2 meals a day when he was already 10, 11 years old. And yet he was one of the pioneers of time travel for our government.
Wow.
After working on some of the most sophisticated defense bombers to protect our country from foreign invasion and destruction. So we can all do that. That's what I've been trying to do with my life. I've always admired my father so much, so deeply, that one of my goals has been to have an invention like he did, patented. And I've now got a patent pending on a device that I've invented with my incredibly loyal and honorable friend Jan Friedman, an individual who's written 5 books for me while I've had vision problems. He's transcribed 5 books in 10 months for me. Jan and I have also developed several devices to help disabled people with medical problems. So I'll be describing those someday when we get them patented.
Fantastic.
But I want the millennials to know, there's no limit in America. Don't put any limits on yourself. And if we bring the country together again in brotherhood and love and justice, we will do it.
Yep.
John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, they were prophets. They were prophets of the America that was to come. And they paid for that with their lives. But that's what we need to become. And when we do that, we will. We have the diversity. We have the depth of wealth and of talent and of optimism. We can do it.
Right.
And that's what I hope to lead.
That's awesome. All right. So your father, he ends up working, he gets Tesla. I'm guessing he got some of those Tesla papers that were taken from the room, and that's what he got to use to
absolutely. In fact, the Tesla teleporter at Curtis Wright, the way it was discovered is they had all of Tesla's paperwork. They did not go to the FBI, as has been told in the Philadelphia experiment cover story.
Yeah, there's 22 lockers of paperwork and books that were unaccounted for out of his 97 locker cases.
They went to the War Department. In fact, there's some evidence that the uncle of President Trump, John G. Trump,
he was the one that he took it out, supposedly.
Was the War Department official, later, of course, known as the Defense Department, or Department of Defense. Those documents, I know to a personal and, again, an historical certainty, were forwarded to the most brilliant physicists in the country that it would make sense to forward them to. They were sent to Los Alamos, where, again, Agnew, Teller, Oppenheimer, Sterling Colgate, and so forth were designing the atom bomb. And they started working on time travel as a result of having Tesla's paperwork. Now, when they were setting up prototypes of those devices in places like Curtis Wright, Curtis Wright is in Woodridge, New Jersey, which is like a half hour from New York City, where Tesla died at the
New York Hotel or something.
The Manhattan Hotel or New York Hotel in Manhattan, something like that. So anyway, Tesla dies in January 7th of 43, and they send his paperwork initially over to Curtis Wright across the river the Hudson River in Woodridge, New Jersey, north central New Jersey, where I grew up in that area. to make prototypes of those devices. When they set up this device with the 2 elliptical booms, there was a technician who walked through the radiant energy to retrieve a screwdriver that he could see through the radiant energy across the shop floor, and he suddenly disappeared and popped into view in Africa.
But they didn't know this. You said that they thought he was vaporized, and they stopped the program until he 6 months later or something, he walks up to the lab door.
Exactly. His boss thought he had been disintegrated by the radiant energy, but he said, "No, boss, I've just spent the last 6 weeks or 6 months, I forget what it was. I just spent the last 6 months convincing these African tribesmen that I was not a god from elsewhere," because he suddenly popped into view right in front of them. In fact, we were trained when we were serving in Pegasus to always do as the Romans did. And they used the example, if you ever find yourself in Africa like this guy did, and an African tribe is putting their face paint on, put their face paint on, because that's you do as the African tribesmen do, just like you do as the Romans do. Always fit into the place we're going to be sending you. That's why, for example, if you look at that picture of me at Gettysburg on November 19th, 1960.
Yeah, let me pull it up for everybody to see real quick. Okay,
I'm
so
wearing,
I've got to move out of the way real quick so they can see it on the green screen.
I was dressed in a Union Bugle Boy outfit, but I am in a warm jacket there and hat that was given to me by a gentleman in Gettysburg, John Lawrence Burns.
Mm-hmm.
He was a hero of Gettysburg, and actually of the War of 1812. But when I went into Gettysburg, when I walked into Gettysburg that morning, I was freezing, and I'd just been wearing a Union Bugle Boy outfit, but no jacket. And we're talking November 19th in southern Pennsylvania, and it was cold, and I was shivering. My teeth were chattering. And John Lawrence Burns brought me into a millinery shop, which is a men's accessory shop, and he outfitted me with a warm Union jacket, oversized shoes, and a hat. And that's when I walked over to the Lincoln speech site, because my mission was to basically have the privilege of seeing Abraham Lincoln deliver the Gettysburg Address.
Right.
When I did, I met my dad there, but he was several years younger, and he had just been at the Time Lab back in East Hanover, New Jersey, where he and Sterling Colgate had used another type of technology to send me to Gettysburg to see the Gettysburg Address. We sometimes dressed for places, but not always. Sometimes we just wore like blue jeans and a polo shirt,
Okay.
the kind of clothes you'd wear to school. But let me talk about the second technology, because that was a big deal.
Okay.
The Tesla teleporter was limited in the sense that if you sent somebody to the time before the emergence of Tesla teleportation, they would be stranded at that point in the time-space continuum.
That's no
good. They would
good.
not have a way to get home to the present. Whether you set them, the past.
That was actually a question I wanted to ask you when you were talking about appearing in the middle of the buildings, not actually in the labs. When you jump, do you? I mean, you're saying you can't jump before time travel was made possible, because you'll be stuck. Where does how do they know where the other end of the tunnel is going to be, or how do they do? I mean, is it just a random thing, a lottery chance where you'll end up, or?
That's one of the things my father helped DARPA do. They found the way to estimate the length of the tunnel. That's the short answer. The long answer is the first 3 guys to jump through the device asphyxiated. They were Navy enlisted personnel who perished because they were in the tunnel too long. So my father helped DARPA calibrate not only the length of the tunnel, but how to set the tunnel to teleport somebody to the past or future, to set the device that we were jumping through, so that when we, for example, jumped through the tunnel, we could jump into the future ultimately. And I participated in those experiments. Okay, so they were able to calibrate the length of the tunnel so we wouldn't asphyxiate jumping through it, die of lack of oxygen. But they also were really able not only to tell where it was going to go, but where it was going to end up in the past or future. So Tesla teleportation went from being a real-time way of going across the country very fast. It took about 2 or 3 seconds to travel the 2,005 miles from Woodbridge, New Jersey to Santa Fe, New Mexico.
So
but it then became a time travel device because they could send us to the past or future, and they did. But if they sent us to a time in the past before the device was developed, we would have been stranded there. And some jumpers were.
So
and that's first one.
So they get this figured out. Your father figures it out. Of course, I'm sure the volunteer list was short because of the previous volunteers. So this, I guess you could say, is what led you to come into the picture. Was he brought you into the picture to show the brass that, hey, this is my own son and it's safe. And that's where you became the first one to jump as a child.
Right. The second were a group of about 24, 25 kids from Latin America who were literally living on the streets and lacking everything: food, clothing, shelter, education. And so the U.S. government did something I don't really approve of. They went into a kind of a Faustian deal with the governments of those Latin American countries to bring those kids up to the United States, especially New Mexico, with the proviso that if they survived uninjured and alive, they would get everything that they were being denied in their home countries. And then I was in the third group. I was in the first American child to teleport. There were then many more. There were actually 140 kids in Pegasus who then teleported. Wow. But I was the first because of exactly what you described, Doc. My dad wanted to show Harold Agnew and the other people in the program that, look, if Tesla teleportation is safe enough for my own son, it's safe enough for anybody's kid. And we really should introduce this in the civilian sector. But initially, they were using kids on teleportation just to test our response to it if they introduced it like in the executive branch, to shuttle the president, the vice president, the secretaries of the cabinet, and so forth, defense, state, etc., around the globe in a time-urgent way without jet fatigue. And I think they've been doing so ever since.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Hillary Clinton and John Kerry showing up in Europe with no jet lag. Man, I'm jet lagged when I go across the pond in a commercial airliner.
Yeah.
So I think they are using teleportation at military bases to shuttle our executive branch officials around. And I think that becomes a human rights issue for Americans and other world citizens. Why should just governmental officials have that right, but not all of us?
Right.
There were medical side effects. There was a disease that mimics diabetes from the Tesla teleporter. I got it. I certainly had it by 2004 when I was in my early 40s. And I actually had proof of that from Jack Pruitt, who was one of the team leaders on the project, who later became the research director for Project Montauk in the early 80s in Long Island, not New Jersey or New Mexico.
That's been back in the news lately. Yeah.
I was taking a large pill that my dad would call my horse pill. I had to learn how to swallow something about the size of a small gumball. I was in New Mexico with him because I had teleported there. So they were working on different medications to prevent metabolic disruption from Tesla teleportation. But it may indeed cause it, but we may have made it safe. We may lose less Americans to car accidents because we're now losing 50,000 Americans a year and suffering 300,000 serious injuries a year, which is what we lost in 13 years of the Vietnam War to casualties, both death and injury, combat-related death and injury. So we're tolerating a Vietnam of automobile use every year. That's something I've become kind of evangelical about teleportation because of. I don't think there's any way, especially since we're already having a diabetes epidemic, despite the fact that we're not teleporting, that Tesla teleportation would damage that many people. I do not think it would be possible.
Now, the purpose behind jump rooms, obviously, transportation. Don't have to worry about busing truckloads of stuff or shipping them across seas. I remember growing up, almost every weekend, driving down the highway, you're going to see a military convoy. You don't see them anymore. You may see them on the train tracks, but you don't see them on the roads that often. I mean, very rarely. And some people say it's tunnel systems. Do you think they're using that now for transporting items, or are they using it for a weaponized purpose? Because I don't see it not still being around or being upgraded to something even cooler. What do you think?
I'm 58 and I served in Pegasus from age 6 to 10, right? 68 to 72. So I think Americans have a right to know that when I was in the program, especially when it really started to heat up in 70 and 71, my father took me not only to the Dulce base underneath the Archuleta Mesa in New Mexico, but into the train system that goes all over the western United States.
Wait, hold on. I gotta stop you. You said he took you into Dulce?
Yeah, and there was nothing there. There's like 200 stories of nothing. But in answer to your suspicion, yeah, the whole underground of the United States is warned with tunnels and waterways to transport U.S. Military vehicles and boats and submarines and so forth across our country without going on our highways anymore, which of course were the legacy of President Eisenhower. But I think of more importance to us as civilians who travel so frequently in these dangerous roads where we're having these 50,000 deaths and 300 highly damaging injuries every year, is that there was no need for us to any longer be using automobiles from 1970 to the present. Next year, that will be a 50-year cover-up, Doc.
Wow.
I mean, that's the time roughly from the end of the Civil War to the beginning of World War I.
Wow.
50 years?
Yeah.
I mean, when my grandfather was born in 1900, the average male life expectancy was 42. Now it's 85. Except on the Lakota Sioux Reservation, where we're depriving Native Americans of their human and civil rights by attacking them during Standing Rock.
Yeah.
When they were protecting watershed, providing an aquifer to 19 million fellow Americans.
Right.
Okay, so we're still tolerating low longevity among some ethnic groups, and I want to end that. I think we're obligated to do so. We have to focus on justice, and one of them is the right to live a long and healthy life. That's just.
And that is a great segue into the next segment. We're at about an hour and a half. I'm going to ask that we take like a 3 minute break. I got a song, by the way, YouTube. This is my song. I did it years ago, so you can't flag me for this song. So we'll take a little break, and then when we get back, I want to talk about your ties to political aspects, what encouraged you to want to take that route, to want to go towards politics, and then your ideas on justice with some cases that you were mentioning earlier. Does that sound good?
Sounds good, Doc. But I think maybe for some of your time travel aficionados, they might want to describe a couple more of the devices.
Oh, well, yes, yeah. Oh, absolutely. We can do that. Let's just do that. I want to give the audience a chance to take a quick break. I'm just going to play this song. It's like 2 minutes and 46 seconds. By the time that's over, we'll be back. In case you need to go get something to drink or anything, Andy, I'm going to grab another Dr. Pepper, and we'll be right back. Is that okay?
That sounds great.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to play my song. This is called Space Pop Genesis. I did this a long time ago, so let's see if it works. All right, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. See you guys in a sec. Turn it down a little bit. There we go. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Andrew, are you with us?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. All right. So we're going to continue on with this amazing interview with Andrew Basiago. And we're going to continue with your time travel things. You said there's two others that you needed to mention?
Yeah, I just thought out of the 8 of them, I mentioned some of the most sophisticated and those that we use the most. Without question, the second technology that was an important part of Project Pegasus was the Chronovisor, both the third dimensional and fourth dimensional Chronovisor.
Now, the way you've described that in the past, just kind of like a layman's terms, would it kind of be like the Oculus eyeglasses? And I mean, it's not this way, but just to give people a plain Jane idea of it, where it's almost like virtual reality.
No, it was related to virtual reality, but it was more sophisticated and yet quite simple. What they were doing was putting an electromagnetic signal through an 8-sided bismuth crystal. In fact, I asked my father, how are you generating this cubical hologram of moving light? And he told me through putting an EM signal through an 8-sided bismuth crystal. And then a time travel researcher named Wynn Keach, who I don't know personally, but who certainly did a good turn for my truth campaign about time travel, found one of my father's patents on bismuth crystals listed as the first work in the prior work section of a patent granted to the famous physicist Leo Osaki of IBM in 1967, right when I was entering Pegasus, involving 8-sided bismuth crystals. So I had said that years ago.
And a bismuth crystal is that the silver one that grows?
Yeah, bismuth is element 83.
Okay, I
had stated years ago that my father's work in bismuth crystals had led to the bismuth crystal that generated the hologram of the Chronovisor as this big cube of light on the stage. But I didn't know that my dad's one of his patents involving bismuth crystals was cited in one involved that's literally about using 8-sided bismuth crystals. That was a major proof of the historical validity and truth of my claims.
So it was a projection of what you were seeing in space and time?
It was actually a holographic recapitulation of a non-local event in the multiverse. The multiverse, if the number of dimensions in the multiverse was expressed in 12-point Times New Roman type font, by one estimate, it would stretch for 163 million miles, the number of dimensions in our multiverse.
Wow.
It is finite, but virtually infinite. So what the Chronovisor was doing was drawing one of those non-local dimensions into the laboratory. Now, the paradox of that was, if we were standing on the stage when the hologram was brought around us, literally to envelop us, which happened to me many times, if we began walking, ordinarily, if we just closed our eyes and walked across a stage, like the Morristown Performing Arts Center in Morristown, New Jersey, where they moved the Chronovisor after it had been at the Standard Manufacturing Company in Convent Station, New Jersey. Ordinarily, if a kid just closes his eyes and walks across a stage like that, he's going to bump his face into the side of the auditorium.
Yeah.
Paradox was when this hologram was brought around us, we went to that time and place. Now, if it wasn't brought around us, it was just on the stage, and we were on the stage looking at it or in the auditorium, yeah, it was a kind of a form of virtual reality in the sense that it was a form of, technical remote viewing, because we could see what was going on inside of it. In fact, the first image I saw of Chronovision was a beautiful scene of a Tudor mansion in England in the year 1500 with a guy walking a horse diagonally across the grounds of the castle. And it was like a storybook picture almost of England in the Middle Ages. It looked like a very nice place to live. So that's the first image they showed us because it was such a nice sort of storybook type of, but it was a real image. There were people in fact, one time I was in the Chronovisor array when they moved it to Curtis Wright, where the teleporters were, pretty much late in my experiences. And one of the technicians had tuned in Lincoln's White House during the 1860s, prior to his assassination in, what was that, April of 1865. And he said, "Oh, you see him? There he is, Lincoln. See him on the left?" So they were able to tune in literally the things that both prominent individuals and just everyday people had done centuries in the past. And in fact, when I was first introduced to Chronovision, they took me to a national security watch post in Flemington, New Jersey, where they showed us what they were doing. They were setting up these Chronovisor images and then filming them. And then they would label the film canister, Paris, 1920, London, 1800, or whatever. But by the time I was born, this program.
Real quick, sorry to jump in. I just question. So, with a Chronovisor, that eliminated the limitation of only going as far back as time travel was created, correct? So
exactly, because when they collapsed the hologram, we popped back into view on the stage in New Jersey in real time. The time we had left.
Okay.
And we were only, regardless of how much time we spent in the hologram, they said, from our perspective as your technicians in this program, you're going to be in there for only 15 minutes maximum. But one time I spent 3 days in New York City around the year 1905, living in this god-awful tenement with these people who were protecting me. It was a tough town. We were going to the past and future in the holograms. And we were there. In fact, I wanted to say that it's a bit of a diversion to some of the most remarkable things that happened to me while time traveling. But it has long been a mystery to American historians of why General George Washington suddenly ordered the Revolutionary Army to retreat from New York Harbor, from Washington's headquarters up in his tent up in Brooklyn Heights at that time, in August of 1776. And I'm proud to say that I and another individual in Project Pegasus, who were fourth graders at the time, this was 1970-71, we were sent to Washington's tent in Brooklyn Heights, and we told him that it was a military necessity that he immediately retreat his troops from New York Harbor.
And why was that?
Washington told that story because he thought we were angels. So it entered American history as, Washington's encounter with angels when he was at Brooklyn Heights and he saved the Revolutionary Army. It wasn't. It was with me and one of the other boys in Project Pegasus.
Now, did the team at Project Pegasus, were they aware of this fact and took advantage of the situation to have you become those angels, knowing that you were going to be misunderstood as, not just being two kids that traveled through time? I mean, was it planned or did it just happen that way?
It's actually stranger than that, but that would have been some cultural consideration they would have shared with us, and they did. But no, what actually happened was they were trying to compare the lives of prominent people as written, like Jesus of Nazareth, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, etc. The Chronovisor images with what the books, the diaries, the stories told. Because they wanted to see whether for one reason, they wanted to see whether they were tuning in the actual past and future on our timeline, given the existence of multiple timelines.
And how do they discern that? How do they know, well, this timeline's different when could just be just a slight difference?
Well, for example, when they sent me to the Lincoln assassination site earlier, actually, than they sent me to Gettysburg, two years early, it's hard to describe. They knew they were dealing with the multiverse because when they sent me to Lincoln's assassination site, the basic event happened, but like if I saw a man walking by talking to a pretty girl, the next time they sent me was the same man talking to that girl, but also her twin sister. or there was a different kid selling the tickets at the front of Ford's Theater.
Slight differences.
Or then he was there with his dad. So every time, those 8 times they sent me to the Lincoln assassination site, or some other kid to the Lincoln assassination site, it changed a little bit.
But
so
the outcome was always the same.
Yeah, but when they were certain that they had identified the right dimension, what happened was they were studying the life of George Washington, and they tuned it in on his tent in Brooklyn Heights in August of 1776 to see what caused him, if he would say anything, to reveal why he did retreat much of the Revolutionary Army from there. I think we lost about 6,000 guys, mostly from Maryland and Delaware, retreating because the British were just lobbing, cannonballs into that whole group there. And we got a lot of the guys out of there and up to Brooklyn Heights and then up on their way to Manhattan. But anyway, they saw me briefing him because, of course, they were accessing the past. And in the future, I would be sent to the past, you see, by Chronovision. So when they realized they had images of me briefing Washington before they had sent me to do so,
they knew you had to do the mission.
They thought, well, what do we do here? Do we send Andy or do we not? What happens if the past doesn't have him going to tell Washington to retreat from New York Harbor? Will America even exist as a country? Maybe when we don't send Andy there, we'll all suddenly enter a world in which the British won the war, etc. Okay?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That's tough to get our minds around, but they were dealing with time travel. So remember, when we time travel, the time traveler is there at the original event. It's not some second happening of the past or future. It's the original event. That's the sine qua non of time travel. That without which, the essential element of time travel. So when they saw me briefing Washington, they wrote down what I was saying, and I had to memorize that to be sent there to give that briefing, which I later did. And Washington was incredible. I consider it one of the privileges of my life to have met General George Washington. Wow. Later President Washington, the first president of our great country. He was.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, he was intelligent, charismatic, courageous, decisive. He was everything that history has recorded, except his appearance. And he was only 44 there, but he already had gray, somewhat curly hair, rather than a wig.
Really?
And he was not as big as he was made out to be. He's always made into this giant figure, this big, tall, muscular guy. He wasn't. He was actually about, I would say about 5'10" and 160 pounds, kind of what I am right now. Mm-hmm. Hey, maybe that's a sign I should be elected president. No. Meeting Washington was, I think, one of the rare privileges of my life. But that was Chronovision, where they were sending us to actual past and future places. And as you said, there was no constraint doing so because when the hologram was collapsed, we were back on the stage in New Jersey in, October 15th, 1971, 3 p.m., So we were not stranded in time.
Well,
the other device I'd like to talk about was what Sterling Colgate invented, and that's known as plasma confinement. That's where we would enter a lucite chamber. We would walk into this radioactive plasma, swirling in beautiful colors. What do we call that? Really beautiful beautiful pastel colors at the end of the lucite chamber. And when we did, we would feel a dropping sensation, and we would go through a cascading dimensional kind of tunnel, kind of like the one depicted in What the Bleep Do We Know?
Okay.
Remember that documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know, and they show, like, going through time and space?
Yeah.
That tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the straight tunnel that we were going through the Tesla teleporter, the plasma confinement chamber would have us kind of be jerked here and there, hither and yon, on this 30 seconds of ups and downs through the quantum plenum in a different type of tunnel, like the one in What the Bleep. So then we would just pop into view. And they put me down in the farm I walked into town, about an hour into town.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had the opportunity to do the same walk in 2013, becoming the first American to revisit an American town after I had first visited it 150 years in the past.
Wow.
18.
And it was like, did it feel like you had been there before? It was like, or was it awkward with it being?
One of the most emotionally moving experiences of my life, Doc.
Wow.
Because as I literally hit the three streets there right before you get to the southern periphery of Gettysburg, I was literally walking on the same pavements and looking into the same shop windows as I had as a kid in 1972, having been sent to November 19th of 1863, but it was fall of 2013 when I did so, and I was 52 years old. So the feedback between those three times was just almost overwhelming. You know, I realized I was in 2013. I remembered what I had done in 1972 when I was 10 and a half, or actually it was spring of 72, so I wasn't yet 11. And I was visiting the town as it had existed in 1863, and then walked down to where Lincoln gave the speech site and saw the gravestones of the soldiers and everything that would then be put in there in 1863. And they were all there, and it was just overwhelmingly moving, especially when I put a rose on the grave of the woman who owned that millinery shop where John Lawrence Burns outfitted me with a warm hat and jacket and shoes.
That's cool of you.
I forget her name right now, but it's in my notes.
That's very
but
cool.
I went to her grave in the Evergreen Cemetery there in Gettysburg, where she and her husband are buried, who was the city councilman, is the town council president of Gettysburg. And I have their names in my notes. They're escaping me right now. But I put a rose on their grave to memorialize the fact that when they outfitted me with that hat, jacket, and shoes, they were giving away clothes intended for fugitive slaves, because they were in fact not only running that shop and directing the town council of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, but they had made Gettysburg a stop on the Underground Railroad.
Nice.
And the very Union jackets and the civilian shoes and the hat I was given by John Lawrence Burns were intended for the fugitive slaves as they were helping get north to freedom in the Underground Railroad.
Wow.
So I was really moved by that when I realized that when she came into the shop and told John Lawrence Burns, "John, what are you doing? Giving away our clothes to this wayfaring strange kid, wayfaring boy. Don't you realize we need these for our slaves?" I couldn't hear that when I went there because I was having this weird distortion. The time was speeding up and slowing down. So I heard sound, I heard voices from them, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. It was too fast or too slow.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't hear what the woman said to John Lawrence Burns, but I'm sure that's what she was saying, because they were in fact the station chiefs of the Underground Railroad station in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So that's plasma confinement, and in fact that's happened to people, by the way, in plasma emissions during earthquakes.
Really?
People have seen plasma and then reported that they've been temporarily stuck in the past. That was the basis of the Montelimar time slip in France, where the Gibneys and the Simpsons from England went into that French town and stayed at that bed and breakfast in the 1890s.
No, I'm not aware of this story.
Famous time slip. There were time slips associated with Fukushima. Remember how before Fukushima there was that plasma in the Japanese sky?
I remember there was warnings, yeah. I have to go back and check out some stuff, but I know that plasma is being seen in the skies, especially before earthquakes. They're seeing those long tower-looking plasmas.
Yeah, if you want to avoid being in a time slip, which is usually temporary anyway, and there is an earthquake, stay indoors, do not run outside. You can not only be decapitated with glass falling during an earthquake, which is a danger, but you want to stay away from rocks and the ground and hills and mountains and other, geological formations.
So avoid California.
The earthquake.
So avoid California.
To avoid, especially Californians, but to avoid time slips, because they do happen.
Yeah.
They have happened.
Wow.
During earthquakes.
Yeah.
So they had discovered this, and Sterling Colgate had basically modeled this as a device in the laboratory, and that's how I got to Gettysburg. That's how I got to 2010, where I met one of the other kids in the project, who is a very famous musician who I will not reveal until I talk to him personally. I was successful in getting one of my friends and allies into his dressing room, but I will reveal who that popular singer was when it was in Pegasus.
Nice.
Anybody checks birth dates of famous American pop singers, like really successful ones, and my birthday, they will figure out who it was. But,
well, I do know you told me about the one music superstar that you encountered on one of your adventures in New Mexico.
One of the most amazing things that happened is that the only adult who, by questioning me, detected that I was teleporting across the country and back during the 4 years I was attached to Project Pegasus was none other than James Douglas Morrison, Jim Morrison of the Doors. And I'm not making it up, because again, just like the Mars jumpers revealing that Obama was, yes, indeed, one of our colleagues, why would I make up a story that Jim Morrison was somebody I met when I had teleported to New Mexico? Because
be a little more specific, because it's coming across like he jumped with you.
I just met him at a bar in Albuquerque after I had teleported there.
But he noticed. He recognized you were special.
He turned to his left and to basically question me about why I was in Albuquerque. And Jim was a heck of a nice guy. He reminded me of like a high school kid, a friendly high school kid. He was just a good guy. And that's the James Douglas Morrison I met. And he questioned me, and he figured out what I was doing. It was just because he had the humanity to question an 8-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well,
he got it right. I told him what I was doing. He said, what brings you to New Mexico, to Albuquerque? And I said, my dad and I are in a secret project involving teleportation, involving DARPA.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, is that like where you jump through a gate in space and you go somewhere else? And I said, yeah, we jumped through a device in New Jersey and enter a tunnel and pop out here in New Mexico. We just did. Wow. And he said, wow, man, what's your name? And I said, Andy. And he said, how old are you, Andy? And I said, 8. And then Jim looked away, and then he looked back at me and said, you're 8, man, and you're jumping across the country? Wow, man, you could end up president of the United States someday. His girlfriend, Pamela Corson, what I was doing. So the story about meeting Morrison is true. I would not have added it to my story as a tall tale.
Mm-hmm.
You met one of the pop icons of the 60s, and literally probably the most distinctive baby boomer of a huge generation of baby boomers, at least in America, would hurt the believability of my story, not advance it. But I did, in fact, meet James Douglas Morrison, and it was really a kind of a neat experience, because I then later in life became a big Doors fan. So I really feel privileged that I was able to meet Jim when I was just a kid, and he was nice to me, and he found out what I was doing. That's really special to me. It's a special memory.
Nice.
But the meeting of the pop star I was talking about was one of the 140 kids on Pegasus became a big star in music.
A recent star, or one maybe in the 80s? You don't have to give the name, of course. I'm just curious.
Well, one born within months of me.
So, but, I don't know if it was a young singer or an older singer. Anyway, not important. You'll tell us eventually.
He's now 57 or 58 because he's a little bit younger than me, but not very much. But I want to say his name because, I really want to go to him and say, I met you in this program. Do you even remember it? Because we were all tortured physically after leaving the program.
Mm-hmm.
I had needles put all the way trying to give me this evacuating headache.
Oof.
My family did not know about that and would not have approved of that. He was deceived by the program. The CIA is both full of good people and full of evil people, and still is. And that's something I want to clean up as president, but and make it an agency of good people, or one not at all. But it's possible that this pop star will not even remember what he did, because when I approached the 5 or 6 kids in my program in New Jersey, out of the 140 of them nationally, they remembered some of our activity, but only one of them remembered teleporting to New Mexico. So I do believe that that mind control was used to suppress the memories of the kids in Pegasus. That would explain why the burden of bringing forward the glory of bringing forward the program has pretty much just fallen on me. But like I said, when I did approach the 5 or 6 kids in my program in New Jersey, one of the boy who lost his feet traveling to New Mexico, when I spoke to him, before I realized it was the boy who lost his feet teleporting to New Mexico, Tesla teleporting there, he remembered teleporting to New Mexico.
And we have to clarify. I mean, I know you and I we've talked for years, but for the new people, the young boy that he's describing that lost his feet was because when he teleported, he appeared standing in a puddle of water, and because the water was in it was moving or something, his feet did not connect to the rest of the body. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was in a fountain on the grounds of a junior high school in Santa Fe that is now the Santa Fe County Community Courthouse Complex. And he popped into view standing in 3 inches of water in this fountain on the grounds of this, give me a second, I'll remember the name of the school. It was Leah Harvey Junior High School, I believe. Because I asked my father, why would they name a junior high school for Lee Harvey Oswald, who had allegedly shot President Kennedy?
Mm-hmm.
But no, Andy, it's just Leah Harvey. Anyway, so they were using the Leah Harvey Junior High School in Santa Fe when it was undergoing, redevelopment into the Santa Fe County Court Complex. And unfortunately, Kevin, I'll give you that much of his name. Kevin popped into view standing in that fountain at the Lee Harvey Junior High School and slid off his ankles.
Mm.
So when I ran past his location as somebody who had teleported to Santa Fe right after him, his feet were in the water.
So there was a displacement.
Oozing blood and connective tissue and so forth and bone. And he was on the ground screaming, my feet, my feet. What am I going to do without any feet? I'm only 9 years old. So I have the birth date of Kevin. He was, in fact, 9 years old.
Mm.
I've been trying to get him to come forward and call me. I know from his pictures on Facebook that he has artificial legs now, possibly, as well as artificial feet.
Mm.
I think he's to be commended for serving in the program, and he's like those who served. He paid a heavy price. He was the only child I know, besides a girl who was blinded by the Chronovisor image, the light creating from the 8-sided bismuth crystal was so bright that we were trained not to look at it or go blind. I never looked at it, even though I'm now having vision problems.
Yeah.
They're serious. But I only knew one kid who was injured in any way in the program, and that was the boy who lost his feet.
Wow.
And I know who he is. I've spoken to 2 of his brothers. I spoke to him in 2005-06 time frame. And at that time, I didn't realize that he was, in fact, the boy who lost his feet. But now I have multiple confirmation of that.
Wow.
From program participants like Mark DePrimo. Mark was 4 years older than me, but he jumped to New Mexico with me in 1972, and he remembers when that individual lost his feet.
Wow.
So I've confirmed it through a fellow teleportee.
All right.
So I would really love for him to come forward if he hears this interview, because he is an American hero. There's no loss of heroism for being injured, advancing the cause of humanity humanity in going in reaching a better world, and that's what Project Pegasus was trying to do.
Right.
I urge Kevin to come forward and begin speaking out about his accident and what he did in the.
Go ahead.
General.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, that would be awesome if we could get everybody together. But before we go too far off the topic into the next one, because I know you want to go into the thing about justice, is you can admit, right, that you had a part in history with, example, the George Washington situation, correct?
Correct, I did.
Okay, so well, and that's awesome. But what I wanted to ask you is this was in the 70s or 80s when you did that trip?
That was in fall of 1970.
Okay, 70. All right, so it is now 2000, and in less than a month or a month away, it's going to be 2020. That's 30 years. No, wait, yes. 70. No. Yeah, my bad. I got a bunch of numbers here on my paper. So that's a lot of time from you being a part of the pioneers of this technology to what it could be today. I mean, is it possible that they might now have the technology to where you don't have to go into a room, you can have it be a portable system like a cell phone, and then boom, you can teleport or you can chronovise. And if so, which I mean, I would think so because we're humans, we progress. Do you think that these technologies are being used for what is being considered and called the Mandela Effect, where people believe something was something like the Bernstein Bears is spelled differently than it used to be, certain logos are different, or people aren't remembering the same thing because, like, the Mandela Effect is named after Nelson Mandela, when some people say he died and some other people say he didn't die till 15 years later, and that he survived prison. So do you think this is that technology that could be causing this Mandela Effect?
Okay. There's really two questions there. The first is there a handheld device to time travel? Yes. In summer of 1971, Chronovision to the Past involving kids was shut down. I was at the meeting where they announced why they were shutting it down.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time they sent the same kid or another kid to the same past event, it changed a little bit. Okay?
Okay.
After that, my father was extremely angry. He was saying, look, Andy, we sent you 8 times to Ford's Theater on the day that Lincoln was shot, April 14th of 1865, and we found that, our American cousin, starring Laura Keene, was there, and the president did get shot each time. But every time it changed a little bit, we learned more about what the past could hold. So it's still a scientific, discovery. It's still scientific information that we can use. He said maybe one time we'll look at the creation of the airplane, and we'll find that Wilbur and Orville Wright had another plane that never got developed. Okay, so after they shut down Chronovision of the Past in summer of 71, my dad took his longtime friend Maria Constancia Chavez, a lifetime resident of Old Town Albuquerque, where she was born on April 28th of 1928, and where she went to her heavenly abode in January of 1981. And Connie was like the mother away from home for me when I was in New Mexico on the project. My father had almost married her in the 50s before meeting my mom, and she was a close personal friend to both my dad and I. In fact, I dedicate my Project Pegasus memoir that I'll be publishing next year, 2020, to my father and Connie Chavez, because they were really the two individuals who were involving me in time travel and protecting me from its risks and downsides, and just dealing with the fact that they were dealing with a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, not a grown-up, and they knew it, and they were protecting me. So my dad had a handheld device that he set for 40 years in the past, and we went back to 1931 in Old Town Albuquerque, Connie's neighborhood. and not just her hometown, but literally her neighborhood. And we were amazed how it looked like old Tucson. All the streets were unpaved. All the buildings looked like, old Tucson, kind of old West type towns. And my father and Connie actually went into a saloon with me and had beers, and I had a Coke. And she was amazed that this was Old Town Albuquerque in 1931, 3 years after she was born, but could not believe how old it looked, and we couldn't either, being familiar with the new Old Town Albuquerque of 1971. So yes, there was a handheld chronovisor that set up a kind of a bubble around the holder that could have been standardized for like military personnel to be able to, run across a field in France and then jump back and join the Normandy invasion.
Oh, nice.
I mean, a beach for that, but then participate in the invasion of Germany in 1945. Operation Varsity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes, the answer is, unless the technology was lost or is sitting on some shelf in the Defense Department or CIA or DARPA, for us to still be talking about developing time travel 50 years after a handheld chronovisor existed, by which you could literally walk from 1971 in Old Town Albuquerque to 1931 and drink a beer there and then walk out of it, turn the device off, and find yourself in contemporary Albuquerque, is ridiculous. Why hasn't everybody had the joy of doing that? They could even set the devices for safe times and places, like who wants to see, Holland in 1800?
Yeah,
I was privileged with the opportunity to see that. You couldn't spend. I've often said that mass time travel on mass timelines by mass people would cause mass chaos. You couldn't have that, but there are some forms of time travel that could be adapted. Certainly, the Montauk chair could be. Let's say somebody has lost a child and they're suffering a reactive depression from that. Think of the benefit of sending them 5 years in the future where they've had a beautiful new baby.
Mm-hmm.
That would
give them hope. It'd give them hope, yeah.
Give them hope and cure their depression when they realize that just 5 years away was happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And then when people go through divorces or deaths or disappointments in their careers, I mean, we all go through that. It's hard to get through life without disappointment.
Right.
Why not allow people at least to access the Montauk chair so they can make, let's say, 3 short visits to their future, 5 years in the future, to see where they're at? And if those futures for that individual were screened right when the person sat down in the chair and they're going to die 5 years in the future, the person administering the chair would not let them go forward. But if they're going to be alive 5 years in the future and their world's going to be better, their life's going to be better, why not give people the right to see that? That's one of the reasons I'm speaking out, is why not adapt time travel so that we can at least use it to help people?
And benefit everyone, yeah.
Let us imagine just Tesla teleportation in real time without time traveling, but teleporting. We could get, and this has been true since 1970, we could get from London, England to Sydney, Australia, not in 24 hours on a commercial airliner, with all the risk of that, including miscarriages among pregnant women and so forth, and blood clots in everybody, and other dangers of flying or crashing, but we could get them in seconds. I mean, high school kids in California could do their senior prom in Paris and then teleport home and go to bed in their beds.
Right.
That technology has been available now going on 50 years next year. I believe that the suppression of that is simply wrong. So I do support the declassification and use of Tesla teleportation in real time, and I support a limited form of time travel via Montauk chair. The more sophisticated forms of time travel, if we allowed mass people to do those, it would create mass chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just give one example. Imagine everybody found out before it was an initial public offering that Microsoft was going to be a huge corporation.
Mm-hmm. It would dilute everything. Wouldn't have value.
All the money in the stock market and the economy would flow into Bill Gates' pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody go, well, if it's $3 now and it's going to go to 5,000 and split umpty times, I'm going to get it. Okay, so we can't allow mass time travel. I know that might be a big disappointment to people, and they may think that somehow I'm taking the side of the government that exploited me, and I'm not. I'm just analyzing the reality of the disequilibriums that mass time travel would create. It's just simply not tolerable.
Yeah.
But we do have an interest in developing Tesla teleportation in real time, because if another country or some faction like a terrorist group or some corporation develops it, we could find ourselves answering to those people simply because they possess teleportation.
Right.
Steal things from us and then just disappear.
Mm-hmm. There's a movie called Jumper where a kid's able to do it himself without any device. It's a special gift. And he does this thing where he's like, I'm going to go to Egypt. So he jumps and teleports into a bank, gets what money he needs and teleports out, and then ends up on top of the Sphinx in Egypt or in Paris or wherever. Yeah, there is those bad apples that you have to worry about. So I do get that on why they might hold it, but I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence because I understand why they kind of keep it secret from the mass majority of the people.
Doc, if you meet a beautiful gal that you love and you want to marry, she has a beautiful spirit,
mm-hmm.
and is beautiful to behold, like my fiance,
mm-hmm.
Gwen, and it's just wonderful for you. And, what if anybody facing a positive development in their life like that, certainly won't happen between Gwen and I, we're going to be together for life. But let's say somebody was introduced to somebody and they later were going to be divorcing them. If you had time travel, they would know that and they would never get involved.
Yeah.
And sometimes relationships that we have that end still enrich our lives big time. A number of the women that I was involved with before I met my beloved and the woman I was supposed to be with, that I will soon be marrying, Gwen,
mm-hmm.
nonetheless enriched my life. I know that I grew my soul loving those women and trying to make it work with them. And I would also encourage your listeners to remember that we are all evolving. We are all children of God. We are all souls who are evolving. So don't despair when something bad happens in your life. A relationship ends. You have some medical problems.
Right.
You have a disappointment in your career.
There's a purpose for it.
Somebody. Because we all have souls, and our souls survive. In fact, I'm going to start talking about the past lives that I remember. I know who I was in several of my past lives. I don't think we have the time tonight to discuss that, but I literally remembered who I was, and I've never forgotten. And by the way, regarding Project Pegasus, one of the things we did was be regressed to one of our past lives, so we would know that if we were killed serving in Project Pegasus, that it wouldn't matter. Our soul would still survive, and we'd go on to another existence.
Yeah.
So the government has known that for over 50 years. And this government pledged in our founding and during our most progressive eras of our history to being literally the fulfillment of the Enlightenment, has concealed that from the American people. The government has concealed the fact that it knows that reincarnation is a reality. In my justice campaign that I hope to lead, those aspects of the truth movement that I'm going to advance are those that go to justice. It is simple justice that as souls, we deserve to know that reincarnation is a reality. Regardless of our religious beliefs, our age, our belief in reincarnation, the U.S. government knows that reincarnation is a reality. I was told that to my face by a U.S. Department of Defense official when I was serving in a U.S. Department of Defense program. And then I was regressed, and I found myself a geology professor during the founding of one of the New England colleges during the colonial period of our history. I don't know what his name was, but I told him what I did. Okay, So past life regression is worth pursuing as a modality of knowing about who we were.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. And I know several of the individuals that I was, not from past life regression, but from early childhood memories that I remembered my whole life, and I have now found who those men were. One was a Native American chief named Big Otter, and one was a Philadelphia physician named Dr. Thomas Bond, who founded the Pennsylvania Hospital with Benjamin Franklin. Curiously, or interestingly, he also visited Washington in the field during his lifetime, which began in 1712. I was Dr. Thomas Bond. As a candidate for president, I'm going to reveal that. I don't care if it costs me the election. The American people and the people of the world, whether they be Catholics or Jews or Hindus or Buddhists or Jains or Zoroastrians or Muslims or whatever, or non-believers of, atheists or agnostics, whatever, we all have a right to know that we possess a soul, and that soul is indestructible. It cannot be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So we have no reason to fear moral death. It makes sense to be in good health and to pursue medicine and health care to live a good life, but we're all headed for another place. And I think it's wrong that the American government has decided to conceal that, especially in a country that was founded by Christians. My mentor, Norman Cousins, wrote a book, Doc, called In God We Trust. And it proves that except for Benjamin Franklin, all of the founders were Christians. They were Bible-believing Christians. In fact, we're going to have Thanksgiving on Thursday.
Yep.
George Washington founded Thanksgiving as a Christian secular sacrament. When you read his Thanksgiving proclamation, you see that Washington wanted to thank Almighty God for America being created. Thanksgiving was started by President George Washington, in a kind of secular holiday, a secular holy day of thanks to Almighty God and to who he accepted as his Lord and Savior, which was Jesus Christ. That's the true history of our founding.
Mm-hmm.
Had the brilliance and the independence and the fairness, the sense of justice to make us a polytheistic country where everybody would be able to be free under the First Amendment to practice their own religion. And as I said, as a result, my life has been enriched by friends and allies and colleagues of every religion on earth in this great country. I've learned something from everybody that I've worked with who's been of a different religion than I, from their religions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the true legacy of America. It was founded by Christians, but as a polytheistic country. And we shouldn't lose sight of that.
True.
There's no reason to be talking, for example, and bad-mouthing Muslims, because the majority of Muslims, 80% of them, are not jihadists.
Right, correct. That is the misconception. But it's like almost at a prejudice level. Just because of their race, they're associated with the bad element, the bad apples.
Right. I mean, I'm a Roman Catholic. I'm not currently practicing, but I was confirmed and grew up as a Catholic. And I identify with certain aspects of Catholic theology because I find them formative and constructive, but I'm not intolerant of certain things that Catholicism is.
Mm.
Nonetheless, I have listened to people from all faiths, and as a result, I've been able to expand my awareness of what life is really about.
More well-rounded understanding, yeah. Well,
so we have. I was going to mention that. What was it? We can move on when I talk about the 4 legal cases I want to talk about.
Correct. We're gonna have about maybe like 10 minutes on each of those.
Okay.
Because we're gonna wrap it up at 3 hours. I think that's a pretty lengthy, good interview. But this stuff is amazing, and everybody's really enjoying it online. So.
Right.
Someone said they heard you on Shade 45 on Sirius XM. Were you on a XM radio show recently?
No, I did a number of years ago. It was with Jenny McCarthy, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was probably somewhat.
I did a number with Mancow in Chicago.
Okay.
I've done Coast to Coast AM 10 times, 5 with George Norrie.
Okay. Well, Richie Rich said he discovered this channel after hearing you, you call into Shade 45 on Sirius XM or something. He goes, he knows it sounds weird, but I believe it. I was contacted by the Brotherhood of Light and directed here. So, Richie, there you go. Thanks for jumping in. We have others too. Pat and Quest 1111, several others. Isabel and Megrahead. I think that's how you say it. So they're having a little conversation online. But yeah, it's been an amazing interview. So let's go into this. You said at the beginning you're an attorney in the state of you're a state attorney or just an attorney. What's the title?
I'm a member of the Washington State Bar Association,
okay,
which governs legal practice in the state of Washington. And then even though I was in solo practice since 1996, in 2014, I was nominated by the distinguished trial lawyer J.J. Sandlin and prosecutor Kate Matthews of Washington to become a member of the United States District Court for the Western District of Washington, which is a lifetime tenure as long as I'm not disbarred from Washington. Mm-hmm. And that gives me the right to take on federal cases, and I have, from Seattle in the north to Vancouver, that area in the south, on the western side of the Cascade Mountains. And I can practice that also. That and my state bar membership allows me to practice federal law all over the country: immigration, Social Security, disability advocacy, and purely federal law.
Nice. Okay. So
I'm moving to Arizona to practice it, Doc. So I may be available as your.
Oh yeah.
On federal cases
if need be.
Like, I'll have to up to the federal district court for, I guess it's for Arizona, to explore that. I might be admissible just based on my admission in Washington. But so I've been practicing law now for almost 25 years as a UCLA and Cambridge educated lawyer, and I know the law. And the first injustice that I wanted to discuss on tonight's show is that, look, I time traveled as a kid, and I went, numerous times. I don't even have a number. I'd like to say 40, but I don't really have the number, because it was extensive activity over 4 years, particularly between 1969 and 72, those 3 years of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. It wasn't hundreds, but it was definitely scores of times. And I went to the past and the future. I watched one of my classmates lose his feet. I heard of another girl in the program, not in my group, who lost her vision, became blind for life. And like those incredible people I admire now, I've had some vision loss, like Jose Feliciano and Andre Bocelli and Stevie Wonder. They're incredible that they've become so talented as musicians despite their vision loss. And think about it. So I time traveled as a kid, and then I went to another planet about 40 times from age 19 to 22 when I was at UCLA as an undergraduate, studying history in the day division and then, advanced math during the night division. And I was denied everything. I was denied my salary for serving. I was supposed to be paid $30,000 in trust until my 25th birthday, which would have been 9/18/86. I was denied that because they detected that I was a future whistleblower on the project. And then when I served going to Mars, all of us, not just me, but all of the Mars jumpers, and like I said, William Whitecross said that there was as many as 1,500 of us on Mars at the same time.
Wow.
We were promised no interest loans to buy houses in the Redding, California area where they were expecting to base the Mars Jumper program. houses in Reading or that area close enough to get to the program. Could have been in Weed for that matter. Or towns around, Red Bluff and around Reading there. And no interest loans that would be repayable during our entire lives. And those houses have now gone from about 150,000 to 100,000 back in the 1980s to like 500,000.
Wow.
Okay, so we've denied that. We were also promised what's called the revolving door of government service. That's where if you lose a job working for the government, you're given another one. That the government keeps you employed. Now, that has not been my career history because we were never given that. I have worked since the program and even during the program and even before it for myself. Initially odd jobs when I was 13 years old, and then a gas station attendant when I was 17. And then when I started going to Mars, I was doing all manner of things, working for a sociologist at UCLA, a pharmacologist, working as a journalist. I started placing my articles in the national press. So what I'm saying is I have survived now into my 58th year somehow by always working for myself, particularly over the last 24 years as a lawyer. 23 and a half years as a lawyer. Okay. Now, that's not what was supposed to happen. The government told us that we would earn, or be given rather, the revolving door of government service. That means even Barack Obama, after being elected president, after being elected senator from Illinois, would have been able to go to the government and say, okay, now let me be, if you can, an inspector for the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah.
I talked to farmers when I was president, We would be able to go to the government and get new jobs when we lost one.
Job security for life, basically.
Security for life. We were denied that. So the first injustice I want to confront is the fact that according to Courtney Hunt of the CIA, who was a strange guy but a good guy, I like to talk about Courtney in my books as the original cigarette-smoking man from the CIA, like in X-Files.
Well, Courtney Hunt, wasn't his middle name Ethan, or what was his full name?
Courtney Maurice Hunt.
Okay, there was, because the guy that they based off the show Mission Impossible supposedly was a real guy. He was part of the Kennedy assassination. Howard E. Hunt, that's who I'm thinking of. My bad.
But E. Howard Hunt, who was his first cousin.
Okay.
But Courtney was not involved in the assassinations of President Kennedy, or he was interviewed about the assassination of Robert Kennedy on 6/5/68, and Bobby died on 6/6/68. Interesting, because Courtney looked like somebody who was photographed in the Ambassador Hotel ballroom, but that in fact was Michael Roman, the president of the Bulova Watch Company. But Courtney looked so much like Mike Roman that he was interviewed by the FBI whether he was a conspirator with Sirhan Sirhan, and he wasn't. And I knew him personally, and he was not involved in Dallas either. But he was in Vietnam when Bobby got shot. So Courtney was, he was the original cigarette-smoking man from the CIA, I think, in X-Files. I wouldn't be surprised, in fact, if Frank Spotnitz and Chris Carter and those brilliant screenwriters who did X-Files based it on Courtney Hunt, because he got around. He was also a screenwriter like an author like his cousin E. Howard Hunt. He wrote historical fiction and really far out plays and screenplays, most of which did not get produced, but which certainly showed a high degree of imagination.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, he was the guy who literally drove me to El Segundo when I first went to Mars via jump room, when he took me to 999 North Sepulveda in El Segundo in July of 1981. So Courtney told me one time regarding this issue of not paying people who have served the military and the intel community in these so-called black projects. I like to call them classified defense-related research and development programs. That's the terminology that my father used. Courtney said there are 50,000 Americans who were treated like I was. 50,000. He said that if the settlements went to trial, they could bankrupt the United States government.
Wow.
That means we're going to have to find a way to pony up the dough if these people are ever going to be paid. And in my upcoming letter to President Trump, A Man Worth over $10 billion. I don't suggest that we soak the rich to make those payments, but we have to find a way to pay what those people were promised. And it wasn't a great amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is I asked President Trump in my letter for the Space Medal of Honor that I won saving Bernard Mendez's life in the Morris jumper. But the bottom line is that 50,000 Americans have been treated in a similar way, and that is simply wrong.
Right.
It is wrong for heroes of our country, and I'm not the only one. There are tens of thousands of American heroes. Their stories deserve to be told. They need to be recognized as people who serve, just like the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts were recognized. And they need to be paid what was negotiated for their service. That's simply right and wrong. It's simple fairness. That's what the law calls substantial justice. It's simply substantially just that those who have served the country, who agreed to serve according to certain amounts of compensation, be paid. And we haven't been.
Wow.
That's the first injustice that I hope to address in my coming campaign, not just for truth, but for love, brotherhood, and justice in our great country.
Wow. Well, got about 20, 30 minutes here. You want to go over these four cases you were talking about earlier?
It's actually three more cases.
Or three more, sorry.
My case, if I filed it, right?
Okay.
Oh, by the way, the reason I didn't file it is because I went to three brilliant lawyers. Again, J.J. Sandlin of Washington, Gregory Kafori of Portland, Oregon, the Oregon Bar, who's been on courtroom TV like 10 or 15 times showing his incredible trial skills, and the brilliant lawyer and friend of mine, Dennis Palmieri of Malibu, California.
Mm-hmm.
So brilliant lawyers in three western states, some of the most progressive states in the Union. Washington, Oregon, and California are and have been the biggest labor movements. And all three of them told me, Andy, if you take your claim of time travel and Mars visitation to either a standard federal district court or a FISA court. FISA is the Foreign Intelligence Services Secrecy Act.
Mm-hmm.
FISA, that's where you reveal what you did and what you know, but it's not revealed publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Open federal district court.
Right.
They said only one thing will happen. Either your claim will be dismissed under Federal Rule of Civil Procedures 12B1 as a fanciful claim, not possible, imaginative, or under 12B6 for failure to state a claim. Now, I took cases to all three of these guys over the years where, for example, in Portland, I brought Greg Kafori a case where a beautiful young woman had received 30 minutes of sexually derogatory calls from 5 people at the fitness club that she worked at. Before we found out that she had signed an arbitration agreement, that was viewed as a $3 million case. But those who time traveled for the government and went to other planets for it can't sue at all and win. So, Doc, what I'm saying is, as a lawyer, I decided to not sue because I knew it would discredit me. Because what's going on in our country that's a condign injustice is the judiciary, the courts, both state and federal, and probably even local, but state and federal courts and lawyers themselves are participating largely in a cover-up of that which the military and the intelligence community does not want litigated. I have essentially no rights, no civil rights, as somebody who served the country for 8 years because of that.
Wow.
They are dismissing these kind of claims as fanciful under B1, the 12B1, or as failure to state a claim under 12B6. That's simply a technicality. It's not just. If you can get Social Security, if you can get the GI Bill of Rights for your service in the military, how can you keep people in these secret projects from even being covered under the GI Bill of Rights for their medical issues? I had to spend a year getting Medi-Cal because I wasn't working as a lawyer because I had lost my vision and had heart and kidney issues from the projects that I served in. and yet I could not be covered under the GI Bill of Rights because the fact that I had been listed as a Navy officer when I was serving was a secret. So, round and around the mulberry bush we go. The bottom line is that America needs to pay those who have served it. And I am one of them, big time. And I've been the most outspoken, and I've talked to the most TV and radio broadcasters. I've started talking in 2004, and I have not given up. I've had an interview practically every week since October of 2004.
Wow.
Because this needs to be corrected. So that's case number one is my own.
Wow. Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thought I lost you there for a second.
Yeah.
So
they all three of them told me that. They said, Andy, forget it. Your case will not be heard in America. Whether it is an open courtroom at the federal level or a closed courtroom under FISA at the federal level, you have no chance of winning. So they said, in fact, you will harm your desire to get this information known because you'll have a negative outcome by a federal court. People say, oh, yeah, when he took this case in the federal court, he lost. And people lose because they're covering up what the intel community and the military is doing. That's wrong.
Yeah.
That's a total abusive process. It's a total denial of both substantive and procedural due process under the Fifth Amendment as extended to the states under the 14th. So anyway, that's case number one.
Okay. And then the next one?
The next one is a case that I personally witnessed. I had a dear friend, she shall remain nameless, to supplement my law firm's income. I worked with her in a financial services capacity in Portland, Oregon, across the river from my office in Vancouver, Washington. And she was an incredibly gracious employer. She was hiring at that time 4 full-time employees and 14 telemarketers. I don't want to reveal her name because I don't want to hurt her current profession.
Yeah, no, you don't have to do that.
She did nothing wrong. But what happened was we were going from an elite club in Portland, Oregon to an elite hotel that her late husband had once owned to listen to jazz after a Christmas dinner several days before Christmas, quite a number of years ago, over 10 years ago. And the Portland police arrested a member of our dinner party. He had a name that they confused with somebody who was wanted on a concealed weapons charge. So they stopped his car, and even though he showed that he was the wrong hair color, the wrong height, and the wrong age as the person with the same age, they arrested him. The young man driving with him, one of the telemarketers who was working with those of us who were full-time employees of our company, asked the police, "What are you doing, man? He's not the guy you said was him. Same name, but wrong guy," and he got arrested. So my friend, the employer of all of us, a beautiful 34-year-old woman from another country, who despite her coming to the United States at age 18 from another country, was was employing 14 citizens of Portland, was grabbed by a Portland police officer by the scruff of her neck, in fact, by her beautiful mink stole around her neck, turned around, had her face smashed against a brick wall, and then another male police officer assisted that police officer in bending her arms high behind her back and body slamming her to the sidewalks of Portland, Oregon, one of the most progressive and far-out cities in the country, and most tolerant. I went to law school there at Lewis and Clark, so I know. I love Portland, but its police are fascists, second worst in the country for police brutality. They slammed this beautiful 34-year-old woman who could have been pregnant at her age into the pavement and broke her nose on the pavement. They then picked her up and brutally handcuffed her so that her arms were far behind her back and walked her down to a police car hundreds of feet away. Doc, I was so disturbed what I had witnessed because I was 5 feet away from this dear friend and employer of mine. as she was being beat up by the Portland police that I literally had an out-of-body experience. I went up about 20 feet out of body, just as I did when I was being molested as a 5-year-old in Project Pegasus. And I talk about that in my book. But I don't talk about this incident because it had nothing to do with my time travel experiences and everything to do with my practice of law and my desire to learn more about finance.
Mm-hmm.
Because money is something that everybody deals with. I mean, Black Americans in this country are not getting justice from the criminal justice system because they can't afford the best lawyers because of income levels. Money is affecting everybody's lives. So I studied finance by taking this job with this beautiful, dynamic woman when I was introduced to her by a mutual friend. Now, she was sent to prison on 4 charges. They were misdemeanors, but they were serious charges that could have involved a year in prison and a significant fine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was a woman who simply asked the police, "What are you doing? Why are you arresting my employees? We just had our Christmas dinner, and we're going over to this wonderful hotel right next to this location right here to listen to jazz.
Right.
What are you doing?" And the cop wouldn't even give his name before smashing this woman's face against the wall on the sidewalk. So I spent a lot of time in Portland that night, and I vowed to represent this woman in the 4 bogus charges that were made against her.
Wow.
And this goes to the second justice issue that I wanted to discuss tonight. All over the United States, as pioneered in Portland, Oregon, county prosecutors and city prosecutors are charging victims of police brutality with misdemeanor offenses like resisting arrest and interference with a peace officer and so forth, so that they cannot sue under federal law for what happens to them. Because
do you think that's why cops always say stop resisting, even though you're not even doing anything?
Exactly.
It's their loophole.
Yeah, because under I'm trying to think of it. I think it's 42 USC 1983, if I'm not mistaken, a so-called federal tort claim or Bivens action. That was the signal case in the landmark case in that doctrine. All Americans, and let me actually inform your listenership. All Americans have the right at the federal level to sue under federal law for the deprivation of civil liberties by any government official operating under color of authority. That includes local, state, and federal officials.
Mm.
That is a Bivens action. Now, what happened after Bivens was passed by the Supreme Court, with actually a lot of liberal judges like William Brennan on the court at that time, from my home state of New Jersey at that. I'm proud of Justice Brennan. He was a good man. What happened was the states figured out, okay, with their counties and cities, if we charge somebody who's a victim of police brutality and would otherwise be able to sue under Bivens, under 42 USC 1983, and get substantial monetary reward for doing so, damages, then let's charge them with crimes so they can't. And this is a massive scandal in America right now. And I witnessed it firsthand. I was right in it. Now, because I was 5 feet away from the cops beating of this woman, not beating, it was a lethal assault by the wonderful police in Portland who are basically hired thugs rather than honorable peace officers. They are thugs in Portland. I would advise anybody to be careful in Portland that they're not abused by the Portland police. But anyway, after she was tried of these 4 bogus crimes that had no basis in what happened, I had had multiple years in the law at that point, and I witnessed, my vision was still perfect at that time, and I witnessed exactly what happened. She did nothing wrong. Nothing. So they charged her with 4 crimes. She was convicted of 2 of them. When she then sued under 42 U.S. 1983 to get damages for her beating, in which she lost her business, all of her employees, her income, her house in beautiful Portland, Oregon, very nice house. I visited a couple times, quite a few times. Her health, her youth, and took years to get back on her feet, and I've helped her do that, just as I helped her testify in the criminal trial to get her acquitted, and then I then testified in the civil case to get her damages. In the criminal case, I was accused of being the worst of the worst by a prosecutor in Portland who didn't even tell the jury who I was. But I was a lawyer of many years' experience in Washington at the federal and state level. Back then I was just in the state level. That I was the 280th American since 1428 to graduate from Magdalen College, Cambridge. That I was a protege of Norman Cousins, one of our greatest humanitarian writers of the 20th century. That I did write for Captain Jacques Cousteau when I was 24 years old. You know, he didn't tell the jury anything except that I was, quote, the worst of the worst. So anyway, she ended up being denied any recovery from the federal government. Why? Because the federal judge in that case, I won't say who she was, but she was a Clinton appointee, appointed by a Democratic president. She had grown up in Portland, was a member of my law school. She went to my law school and was a member of the Multnomah County Bar Association, which, you know, governs Portland. And she ruled that revealing the truth about the cop who beat up this young woman would be more prejudicial than probative. It would tend to prejudice the case rather than prove it. Now, what did we know about that cop? And I know this is almost unbelievable. The cop who beat up my friend and employer that year had put 8 members of the Portland citizenry in the hospital. He put 8 Portlanders in the hospital, and during his career had 33 citizen complaints for police brutality, and he had killed an innocent man with his revolver. So here's a cop in Portland, a progressive city, a largely democratic city, a city that had one of the finest labor movements in the country, that was largely founded by veterans of the Civil War from the Union, like my great-great-great-grandfather, August Borneman, some of the great-great-grandfathers and grandfathers of some of my classmates at Lewis and Clark, and should be run as a Union city, not some stronghold of the Old South. But this woman was denied any recovery for being almost beaten to death by the Portland police, because the fact that this cop had put 8 Portlanders in the hospital that year and 33 citizen complaints during his career was deemed prejudicial by the judge. Well, wait a minute. If that had been a harassment case and a divorce case where a husband had beaten his wife eight times, or not, put her in the hospital 8 times and beaten her 33 times, where she complained to the cops 33 times, or a dog bite case where a dog had bitten and put 8 Portlanders in the hospital and had 33 citizen complaints for dog bite before it was put down as a canine, those would have come in at the state or federal level. But because this woman was born in another country, because she was from the Portland elite in a democratic city, perhaps because she was a Republican, perhaps because she had an accent, perhaps because the Portland federal judges are engaged in a conspiracy to deny substantial justice by the federal court system whenever the brutality of the Portland police is implicated. She did not receive any kind of recovery, despite the fact that I was available as a distinguished member of the bar in the state next to Oregon, Washington, to say, wait a minute, this was a wanton attack upon a beautiful 34-year-old woman who could have been pregnant, who did nothing.
Right.
This was fascism. And yet I was never adequately questioned by either her criminal lawyer, who was a former president of the Oregon Bar Association, or by the federal judge, who was a Clinton appointee to the federal court that we appeared in front of to sue on her behalf, the federal tort claim. Okay, so what does this is dead in America. I want to revive Lady Justice. I want to live in a country in which every American enjoys justice, including those who have come here to help us perform the work we need, such as all of my many friends, and now one of my most beautiful and wonderful relatives, born in Mexico, our neighbor. You know, when I ran for president, I published my paper, 10 Reasons Why Mexican Americans Are Good for America. They are.
Just to let you know, Andrew, we've got a few more minutes left.
Right. Okay. So I just want to say that I want to achieve justice for all Americans, including those who have come here. And we have to address the fact that they're engaged in a scam to prevent those who are victims of wanton police brutality from suing under the federal tort claim. And that is a disgrace in a free country.
Right.
Or that was once free. Okay, that's number 2.
Well, we got like 2 or 3 minutes left, so.
Okay, I'll be real quick. Number 3 is, for years I was defending a man who pled guilty to a statutory rape that he didn't commit when he was 22. He is finally free after 16 years in prison. 10% of Americans pleading guilty are innocent individuals, at least according to one study by the American Bar Association. 10% of those pleading guilty are innocent. They are doing so to get lesser offenses and shorten their jail time. This young man that I defended was one of them. He pled guilty to a statutory rape that he did not commit because his criminal lawyer and his 2 parents, who were then divorced, told him to do so. He is just out, 16 years. He's now 38, pushing 40. He literally missed the whole childhood of his 2 children, who were kids when he went to jail.
Wow.
Now, there are now 6 million Americans in prison, 2% of our 327 million population. We have to let innocent individuals out of jail by having a system of proving people's innocence. It can't be barred based on time measures or anything. If anybody's languishing in jail who is innocent, they all deserve the right to a new trial immediately. And to prevent innocent people from going to jail, I want to advance the notion that no guilty pleas should be allowed to be entered. In other words, because supposedly people are innocent until proven guilty by the state and federal government should be required to prove guilt, but everybody should be pled innocent upon first being tried. Nobody should be allowed to plead guilty. This is a miscarriage of justice that has created a disaster in our country. The injustice of what is 10% of 6 million? 600,000? There are 600,000 Americans languishing in prison.
Wow.
Because they pled guilty to a crime they did not commit in any way to get a lesser charge.
Right.
And to do less time in jail.
Right.
Because they were advised to do so, often by their lawyers.
Yeah,
There is
more often than you
Americans
think.
in jail who have pled guilty to crimes they didn't commit, as there are members of the American Bar Association. We're at a break point here, Doc. We need to re-examine the question of fundamental justice in our country, and that's a big one. If elected president, I would change the law so that no guilty pleas can be entered by those arraigned, and nobody be given a lesser included offense for pleading guilty. It's led to a disaster. And then, of course, there's number 4, which is the whole fact that Roger Stone has been sent to prison. What did Roger do? He got 5 presidents. Nixon reelected, and then he got Reagan, Bush 2, Bush 43, and Trump elected. He wrote the best book on the JFK assassination, proving that it was his vice president, Lyndon Johnson, who shot our beloved President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. A great book, and he did a series of great lectures around the country about it. Excellent book, of course, being Phil Nelson's on the same subject, Phil Nelson's.
Wow.
But from my perspective, especially after Roger got voted the best dressed man in America by Gentleman's Quarterly, GQ, regardless of his libertine sexual lifestyle, which has involved straight sex, gay sex, and in between, threesomes, which is the right of Americans to have sex with consenting adults.
Mm-hmm.
Roger Stone as a gentleman and a scholar. Okay, why is he facing 50 years in prison on February 3rd when he's sentenced? He's been charged with lying to Congress and obstruction of justice. But actually, what he did not want to tell the truth about, which is what he leaked to WikiLeaks under Julian Assange, who's also languishing in prison now, and that he leaked to Alex Jones, is that William Jefferson Clinton, the 42nd president of the United States, made 26 trips on the Lolita Express to the Caribbean compound of the late Jeffrey Epstein, who may very well have been murdered, to conceal the involvement of distinguished and famous Americans and wealthy Americans around our country in pedophilia.
Yeah, and I wish we would have brought that up earlier, because that's a big topic right now, that especially that I discuss. But I've got to wrap this up because we're at 3 hours, and my computer's going to get full with the video that it's recording, and it'll lock up. So I don't want to lock up in the middle of the show.
Roger, to get him released. I do not believe that an America in which Roger Stone is in prison is an America that I want to live in. It is wrong. I don't believe he's done anything wrong. And I don't believe, for example, that lying to Congress is anything but somebody's exercise of their First Amendment rights to freedom of speech, press, and assembly. So that was the fourth case.
Well, fantastic. Andrew, I know everybody has been on watching this since the moment we started. They've just been enthralled. I want to have you come back and we could talk more. We could talk about Epstein and the whole thing with the cabal and Q if you want. That's a huge topic that everybody needs to know about that doesn't already know.
Right. I know some of that, but I really am. I'm communicating with, not yet with Roger, but with a friend of his to take his cause on as a cause celeb rather than as a legal case, because I'm dealing with my own health issues now. But I have the power to really get going on this campaign for justice. So I'll be communicating with Roger, hopefully, in the